A devastating thrust shatters the earth where his target just stood. But instead of fear, a confident smirk flashes across the Dodger's face. Raw power collides, sending a massive shockwave ripping through the battlefield. An unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The challenger leaps back, eyes wide as the terrifying reality of the situation sets in. Then the true monster awakens, flooding the weapon with suffocating brilliant mana. Taking to the sky, a blazing spear is readied for a lethal plummet. A blinding flash of speed leaves absolutely no room to breathe. And with one earth-shattering blow, the very limits of strength are violently broken. But to understand how we reached this jaw-dropping clash of prodigies, we have to rewind to the very beginning. A memory of his past life flashes by. Some traumas never fade even after death, like the moment our guy first stepped onto the blood-soaked battlefield at 25. And the sheer soul-crushing weight of taking over 2,000 lives. The veteran recalled the exact moment his battered body finally gave out. The memory fades. Back in the present, a different kind of battlefield unfolds. Following his parents' passing, the reddish-purple-haired young man's massive inheritance is placed squarely in the greedy hands of his uncle. The blonde notary slides the documents across the table, urging our hero to sign his life away. The brown-haired uncle doesn't even try to hide his impatience, barking at the kid to just get it over with. The uncle flashes a greasy smile, promising to return every single penny once his nephew comes of age. In his original timeline, this is the exact moment everything went straight to hell. But this time, our boy rips the contract right down the middle, demanding the funds be locked in an imperial bank account under his own name. The uncle's jaw drops as the shredded paper flutters to the floor. Unfazed, our hero calmly dictates a new set of terms, demanding a special clause that makes withdrawing a single coin impossible without his physical token and signature. That completely shatters the uncle's friendly facade, and he violently snatches the kid by the collar, screaming, "Absolute bloody murder." But instead of cowering, our guy just flashes a smug little smirk. Honestly, he was worried the old man might actually let this slide. Without missing a beat, he winds up and drives a brutal punch straight into his uncle's face. As the scammer hits the floor groaning, our boy coldly thanks him for being the exact same piece of trash he remembered. He then snaps his terrifying gaze over to the blonde notary, who practically jumps out of his own skin. Sweating bullets, the terrified suit frantically scrambles through his bag to draft up that special clause immediately. Originally, as a helpless 13-year-old, he was completely at the mercy of these vultures. But the game has changed, because this kid has officially regressed to the past with all his memories intact. In the bitter end of his original timeline, a lone warrior stood in a desolate moonlit gorge. He was a soldier back then, battered, broken, and gasping for air after a completely reckless military operation went south. As a centurion named Damien, he knows from the start that mere 100 men can't wipe the massive force of 2,000. Coughing up a violent spray of blood, he realized his battered body had finally reached its absolute limit. The sheer agony and shock of their devastating defeat clouded his vision. Reaching out with a trembling hand, he found the dead soldier with purple hair lying lifeless on the rocky earth. Damien gently closed the fallen soldier's eyes, whispering a hollow apology for an operation that command had deemed a success. As he dropped heavily to his knees, the crushing guilt of being too weak to protect his squad tore him apart. He slammed his fist straight into the dirt, cursing his own pathetic powerlessness. His fatal injuries finally took their toll, leaving him struggling as his lifeblood stained the ground. Collapsing entirely, the centurion accepted that his time was officially up. As he lay flat on his back amidst the total carnage, a flood of dark thoughts began to wash over him. Staring up at the cold moon, he agonized over his late start, wishing he had enlisted long before he turned 25. Pressing a blood-stained arm over his face to hide his tears, our hero made one final, desperate plea for a second chance. A tragic vision flared in his mind of the glorious future that could have been. A triumphant timeline where he stood uninjured, leading his cheering comrades to absolute victory. With that final desperate thought, the dying soldier's strength gave out, letting his shattered blade slip from his bloody fingers as the world faded to black. Later, safely back in his room, our boy suddenly gasps for air, waking from a nightmare of his past life's death and tightly clutching a pristine bedsheet. Patting his own face, Damien marvels that the impossible has actually happened. He's really been sent exactly 17 years into the past, right back into his teenage body. Throwing off the covers, our guy doesn't waste a single second, letting his veteran instincts take over as he rushes to check his most crucial asset. Lifting his shirt, a massive wave of relief washes over him when he confirms his mana core is perfectly intact, meaning this time around he can finally learn to wield magic. Staring down at his hands, our hero reflects on the absolute misery of his original timeline, where losing his inheritance forced him to scrape by in the brutal slums. He was framed by the hooded gang members and dragged through the dark cobblestone alleys in heavy chains. From there, the system chewed him up and spit him out, forcibly conscripting the young orphan and throwing him straight into the meat grinder of a never-ending war. Standing bound before a wooden military palisade, the teenage prisoner truly believed his life was over before it even had a chance to begin. Back in the present, Damien falls back onto his mattress, marveling at the sheer willpower it took to climb the ranks and become a centurion despite all that trauma. But a cynical smirk quickly creeps onto his face, knowing none of those hard-earned achievements mattered since he ended up bleeding out in the dirt anyway. Suddenly, a faint creak in the floorboards cuts his pity party short, and his eyes snap wide open as a lifetime of lethal battlefield instincts violently kicks in. He sits up on the edge of the mattress, his radar pinging as he senses an uninvited guest creeping toward his room. Without making a single sound, our boy slides a hidden dagger out from under the sheets. Out in the hall, the cloaked intruder slowly wraps a black-gloved hand around the door handle. The latch clicks and the heavy wood creeps open. But before the cloaked intruder can even scan the room, Damien launches himself from above with a plunging drop attack. His blade sinks deep into the assassin's thigh, ripping a sharp cry of pain from the guy's lungs. Blood splatters his face as he curses under his breath, annoyed that his nerfed teenage stats meant the strike only went halfway in. Suddenly, the second cloaked intruder lunges from the shadows, screaming that he's going to end our guy's life. Damien just leans back effortlessly, letting the lethal slash carve through empty air. The second intruder presses the assault, charging forward with a wild, desperate thrust. Ducking low, our hero slips right under the sloppy guard like he's playing on easy mode. And with a brutal, swift counterattack, he drives his dagger straight into the assassin's gut. Standing over the bleeding bodies with his eyes glowing a demonic red, our guy raises his blood-soaked dagger and coldly demands to know exactly who ordered the hit. The surviving assassin groans on the stone floor, bleeding out from the brutal counterattack. Our boy doesn't give him a single second to breathe, violently yanking the thug up by his collar. Pressing a blade right to his face, Damien demands to know if Uncle Pucker sent them. When the man hesitates, our hero ruthlessly plunges the dagger straight into his shoulder. But before he can extract a straight answer, heavy footsteps echo down the hall. A blonde swordsman steps into the light, and Damien immediately recognizes the veteran killer as Mookman. His mind races, instantly piecing together what this new arrival actually means. Deciding the captive is no longer useful, our guy casually slits his throat. He remembers it clearly. A wave of dark nostalgia washed over him as he recalled his past life. 17 years before the present regression point, he was easily cornered and dragged through the alleys by these exact same thugs. The bearded man greedily clutched gold, making it all click. Pucker had sold him out for a handful of coins. Back in the present, fueled by the fresh sting of an old betrayal, Damien drives his knife into the corpse one more time. He yanks the blade free from the corpse, sending a fresh spray of crimson across the floorboards. The realization claws at him, and our boy's eyes burn with absolute fury as he curses that treacherous dog of an uncle. But the moment is cut short as Mookman glares down at him, the veteran's scarred face twisting into a sinister scowl. Without a single word of warning, the blonde swordsman explodes forward, closing the distance in a flash. He unleashes a lethal horizontal slash meant to take a head, but Damien casually leans back, letting the cold steel whistle right past his nose. Our guy doesn't even flinch, genuinely wondering to himself if Mookman was always this pathetically slow. Mookman starts swinging wildly, chaining massive sweeping arcs that our hero weaves through like an absolute ghost. The veteran screams in sheer frustration as he brings his blade down, completely unaware that he's fighting a regressor with maxed-out evasion. After being beaten hundreds of times in his past life, Damien learned to read the microscopic tells. The shift of a gaze, the planting of a foot, and the twitch of a shoulder. He smoothly ducks under another desperate horizontal swing, seeing the exact trajectory before the blade even leaves the station. Enraged, Mookman brings his sword crashing down in a furious overhead strike, but our guy just casually sidesteps the attack like it's nothing. Slipping right inside the man's wide-open guard, Damien drives his dagger straight up into Mookman's wrist, painting the air with a fresh spurt of blood. Shattered by the strike, the swordsman's grip completely fails, sending his weapon clattering uselessly against the stone. Mookman shrieks in pure agony, clutching desperately at his spurting wound. His legs give out entirely, sending the veteran killer crashing to his knees before a literal 13-year-old. Trembling uncontrollably, he stares at the steel embedded in his flesh, his brain completely short-circuiting at the reality of his defeat. With zero hesitation, our boy violently yanks the blade free, uncaring as a fresh spray of dark blood splatters across the room. Pale and drenched in sweat, the defeated assassin looks up in sheer, unadulterated terror at the absolute monster wearing a child's face. Damien calmly wipes his bloody knife clean on his tunic, those piercing red eyes glowing menacingly in the dim light. He coldly breaks it down for the guy, explaining that it wasn't some high-level magic. He just saw every single attack coming from a mile away. Completely baffled by the impossible explanation, Mookman just stammers in shock. Closing the distance in a flash, our guy steps in and presses the freshly cleaned blade right up against the man's throat. Desperate to survive, the thug tries to leverage his gang, warning that the rest of his crew will definitely hear about this. But our hero just presses the sharp edge deeper, casually pointing out that dead men have a notoriously hard time spreading rumors. Leaning in, the boy demands to know if his Uncle Pucker was the one pulling the strings. Mookman bites his tongue, stubbornly refusing to sell out his employer. Tilting his head, our guy casually threatens to cripple the veteran for life if he doesn't start talking. Staring into those unnatural glowing crimson eyes, the terrified thug realizes this is no normal 13-year-old. He finally cracks, confessing that Pucker hired him to keep the kid alive. But our boy coldly cuts him off. Having heard exactly what he needed, Damien whips his blade across Mookman's neck in a blinding flash of red. The swordsman clutches his ruined throat, eyes wide with absolute shock as the life rapidly drains out of him. He slumps to the floor in a pool of blood, while our hero turns his back without a single ounce of hesitation. With his departure only days away, our guy resolves to scrub every last loose end from the estate. In his past life he learned the hard way that leaving enemies breathing only breeds disaster. Stepping out into the hallway, his mind is locked onto a path of absolute eradication. The heavy wooden door clicks shut, leaving Mookman's corpse to rot in the dark. Meanwhile, across the estate, dead silence hangs over Uncle Pucker's multi-story manor. Inside, a cloaked assassin checks his silver pocket watch, expecting his squad to be done by now. Pucker is sweating bullets at his desk, clutching his bruised chest in an absolute panic while the hired killer casually assures him the target is as good as dead. The assassin flashes a condescending smirk, openly mocking his employer for being this terrified of a literal teenager. Pucker slams his fist down on the mahogany, his battered face twisting into pure venomous rage at the disrespect. The hitman just brushes off the tantrum, telling him to sit tight and warning him not to even think about docking his pay for the slight delay. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoes against the heavy wooden door, freezing them both in their tracks. Assuming his men are back with the package, the assassin heads to answer it, leaving Pucker to silently fume over the insurance contract, keeping his own hands tied. The uncle mentally vows to tear the kid apart the very second that paperwork clears. But the moment the hitman pulls the door open, a lethal blade thrusts straight through the narrow gap. He leaps backward on pure instinct, narrowly dodging a surprise strike that would have put him in the dirt. Landing gracefully back inside the study, the grim realization hits the assassin that his elite guards outside must have been completely wiped out. The door swings wide to reveal our boy standing in the frame with a blood-soaked dagger, casually greeting the hitman as nothing more than a lowly lackey. The cloaked assassin bristles at the sheer disrespect, his eyes narrowing dangerously under his hood. Damien just smirks, relentlessly mocking the veteran killer for being an obedient attack dog, taking orders from a literal pig. Realizing the actual severity of the situation, the assassin slowly turns his head back to his sweating employer. He flatly informs Pucker that his commission fee has just tripled on the spot. Drawing his own blade, the mercenary justifies the steep price hike by pointing out the absolute massacre of his elite squad outside. Crimson drips steadily from the tip of our hero's dagger, painting a grim, undeniable picture on the study floor. Dropping into a low combat stance, the assassin finally acknowledges the 13-year-old as a deadly, completely unexpected variable in this mission. Still cowering behind his desk, Uncle Pucker screams in absolute pants-wetting frustration. The hooded swordsman coldly announces he's backing out, sliding his blade from its sheath to cover his retreat. Pucker looks back in sheer terror at the standoff between the veteran killer and his nephew. Our boy's dark, suffocating aura flares up like a final boss, making even the seasoned assassin flinch. Desperate to keep breathing, Pucker screams that he'll triple Montal's payment if he just stays and fights. Catching a whiff of that bag, Montal turns right back around with a greedy smirk, declaring the negotiation complete. The assassin tells our hero it's nothing personal, just business. But Damien coldly replies that he's got plenty of hard feelings. In his past life, Damien spent half his childhood running like a rat in the slums because of scum exactly like them. It was in those dark alleys that his monohull was permanently shattered, completely ruining his future. Back in the present, our guy grips his spear tight and tells the assassin to shut up and die. Enraged by the disrespect, Montal charges forward with a vicious battle cry. But Damien doesn't even blink, instantly countering with a lightning-fast thrust that grazes the man's inner thigh. The hooded swordsman breaks into a cold sweat, suddenly realizing this kid is deliberately targeting his mobility. Damien unleashes an absolute barrage of thrusts, forcing the veteran to frantically leap backward just to survive the blender. But the second Montal's boots hit the floor, he rips his blade forward in a massive, desperate counterslash. The veteran assassin already map out his strategize, the moment our bog defend his face. He will slice our boy's thigh open with his blade. Fully prepared to deliver the strike, the assassin swings his sword in a wild, blinding arc. Damien effortlessly weaves past the follow-up strike, his eyes completely deadlocked on his prey. Realizing he's locked in a room with a literal raid boss, Montal drops low and rips a desperate sweeping strike right at the kid's legs. But his steel cleaves through absolutely nothing but empty air. The protagonist gracefully spins around the attack, having already read the guy like an open book. The sword was just a cheap feint to hide a dagger strike. Riding the momentum of his spin, Damien slams the heavy shaft of his spear directly into Montal's chest with enough force to shatter ribs. As the assassin goes flying across the room, Damien coldly lets him know that his little parlor tricks were painfully obvious from the start. Gritting his teeth in humiliated rage, Montal spits a curse at the brat. He lunges forward for one last suicidal attack, but Damien slashes him down before he can even finish his sentence. The assassin collapses to his knees, violently coughing up black blood as his life fades. Looking down at the fallen swordsman, Damien notes that while he was a step up from the thugs outside, he was still just a back-alley amateur. With the hired muscle dealt with, our guy slowly turns his glowing red eyes toward his uncle. Trembling on the floor, Uncle Pucker begs and pleads for his nephew to just hear him out. But as our boy's footsteps echo closer, the man's pleas turn into terrified shrieks. A blood-curdling scream rings out into the night, signaling the definitive end of Uncle Pucker's greed. Later, a massive sum of 6 platinum and 650 gold is deposited into Damien's account. Sitting in a high-end office, our hero reviews the paperwork, having successfully cashed in on his parents' life insurance. He politely thanks the notary for handling the massive transfer of funds. As Damien turns to leave, the nervous clerk asks where he plans to head next. Peering out the window, the clerk notes that our guy's carriage is already packed to the brim for a massive road trip. Damien casually mentions that he's enlisting in the military to track down some old acquaintances. Soon enough, the wheels are kicking up dust as his ride rattles down a dirt road toward the mountainous border. While he absolutely wants to reunite with his past life squad, our hero admits to himself that the battlefield is simply the only place he truly feels at home. A grim vision flashes in his mind, knowing that in just 5 years, the kingdom is going to start forcibly dragging every young man they can find into the meat grinder. He foresees an unavoidable continent-spanning era of absolute slaughter rapidly approaching on the horizon. Clutching his chest, Damien breathes a heavy sigh of relief, knowing that his internal monocore is perfectly intact this time around. Instead of being drafted as a frail 25-year-old late bloomer, enlisting voluntarily right now gives our guy a game-breaking head start. Visualizing his immediate grind, he plans to master the Delft mana cultivation method over the next week before officially pulling up to the 3rd training camp. Staring out the carriage window, the young spearman vows that he absolutely refuses to be swept away by the tides of war this time. Instead, our guy is going to completely and utterly dominate them. Exactly 1 week later, the heavy bone-crunching sounds of combat echo through the courtyard of a massive stone military fortress. A wooden spear crackles with raw purple mana as it absolutely obliterates a training dummy. The brown-haired and muscular onlookers watch from the sidelines in absolute shock, wondering how a literal kid is throwing down like a seasoned warlord. Sweating profusely, our boy lands another devastating mana-infused blow against the reinforced target. But as he pauses to inspect his bruised and bleeding palms, the physical toll of his regression sets in. In his mind's eye, a translucent image of his past battle-hardened hand overlaps his current fragile 13-year-old skin. His self-reflection is cut short when an armored instructor marches up, asking if he's a new applicant. The man praises the kid's flawless spearmanship, asking exactly where he learned such high-level techniques. Damien panics internally, a vision of soldiers running drills flashing before his eyes as he realizes he just casually busted out a military style he shouldn't know yet. Thinking fast, our guy drops a flawless lie, claiming it was a technique passed down by his late father. He spins a tragic sob story about his dad's deep military pride, a masterclass in manipulation that scores a perfect 100 with the instructor. Flustered by his own perceived insensitivity, the man frantically waves his hands to drop the subject. Clearing his throat to regain his professional composure, the instructor formally asks for the young prodigy's name. Snapping to perfect attention, our boy formally introduces himself as Damien. The armored instructor gives him an encouraging pat on the shoulder, wishing him the best of luck in the trials. Damien bows respectfully as the man turns and heads back up the stairs. But the second he's left alone in the courtyard, a strange resonant hum begins to vibrate from his waist. Looking down at his scratched hands, he feels a familiar, intoxicating surge of power welling up inside him. A brilliant sphere of purple energy ignites inside him, and Damien cracks a triumphant smile, realizing his mana core is finally awake and he's officially back in the game. The legendary Delft mana cultivation method, a notoriously strict but incredibly efficient technique created by a literal genius 15 years in the future. Rewind to his past life, where a shattered mana core left our guy absolutely desperate, grinding this exact method in the dark just hoping for a miracle. His own subordinates would roll up just to talk trash, openly mocking their captain for trying to cultivate mana when he couldn't even spark a basic aura. He'd snap, sending those punks scattering like roaches with a single furious glare. That was then. Now all that tragic grinding is finally paying off as pure purple mana swirls around his hand, leaving him with just one goal: ace the entrance exam. He glances around the bustling courtyard, his veteran instincts already scanning the crowd. As he steps onto the training grounds, a sudden realization hits him. A certain legendary figure from his past life started out in this exact same camp. An imposing silhouette of a silver-haired warrior flashes in his mind's eye, and our boy can't help but wonder what the future powerhouse looks like as a rookie. The comic cuts to the testing field, where a sea of fresh-faced applicants line up for their very first trial. The first objective is dead simple: pick up a massive 30-kilogram boulder from the dirt. It's a classic meathead filter designed to weed out the weak, and Damien squats down to get a solid grip on the heavy stone. With his newly intact monocore doing the heavy lifting, he hoists the rock over his head like it's made of styrofoam, instantly securing a passing grade. Our boy brushes off the sweat with a smirk, realizing that hitting 1 star in his mana cultivation has basically turned this exam into a tutorial level. With the heavy lifting out of the way, the crowd gathers around the wooden platform for the next phase of the gauntlet. A blonde-haired instructor steps up to the edge of the stage, projecting his voice across the courtyard to announce the second trial. It's an endurance run, and the serious shift in Damien's eyes tells us this isn't going to be a simple jog around the track. The proctor lays down the law. They have exactly 90 minutes to cross the finish line, and while a little shoulder checking is fair game, outright attacking each other is strictly forbidden, a rule that immediately tips our guy off to a hidden catch. Sure enough, a quick glance at the suspiciously jacked undercover applicants scattered through the crowd confirms that the military has planted hidden instructors to play referee. A confident smirk creeps across the regressor's face, fully ready to turn this obstacle course into his own personal playground. The recruits toe the thick red starting line, the anticipation hanging heavy in the air. But just as Damien stretches out his shoulders, an unfamiliar voice cuts through the crowd, noting that they've been sorted into the same running group. A blonde-haired kid strolls right up to our hero, casually dropping the bombshell that he's been keeping a very close eye on him. Damien raises an eyebrow at the sudden attention, but as he gets a good look at the kid's confident grin, a nagging sense of familiarity claws at his memory. The blonde-haired boy leans in close, smirking like the answer is painfully obvious. Dropping his voice to a whisper, he lays his cards on the table. He knows our boy can use mana. Damien's mind races, knowing full well that a commoner who can sense aura either has wealthy backers or a seriously special background. A sudden realization hits our hero like a freight train just as he asks the kid his name. The boy introduces himself as Affle, and Damien's eyes go wide at the drop of that legendary name. A vision of the timeline to come flashes before his eyes. An adult Affle kneeling to receive a count's title, destined to become a legendary general before he even hits 30. Blinking away the awe, Damien watches the future legend extend a friendly hand, suggesting they team up to beat the boredom. Our guy doesn't hesitate to shake on it, figuring you'd have to be crazy to pass up an alliance with a certified powerhouse. Their impromptu networking session is cut short as an instructor barks through a megaphone, ordering the recruits to brace themselves. The whistle shrieks and instantly, Affle and the frontrunners blast off the starting line at an absolute dead sprint. Damien hangs back for a split second, watching the dust kick up as the overeager pack surges forward. He can't help but sweat drop at the sheer chaos, wondering why these rookies are burning all their stamina right out of the gate. Our guy locks onto the horizon, instantly recognizing the infamous Wailing Wall, the real filter of this physical exam. Affle suggests a classic marathon strat, proposing they draft behind the pack and overtake the exhausted runners at the finish line. But pacing is for NPCs. Damien declares that's just not his style and hits the gas, blasting forward and leaving the blonde boy eating his dust. Meanwhile, the rest of the oblivious recruits are taking it easy on a light jog, saving their stamina for the final stretch. Up ahead in the pack, a blonde-haired hidden instructor hears a suspicious rumbling approaching from the rear. He glances over his shoulder to see our hero charging at them like a runaway freight train, wondering what kind of crazy kid sprints this early. He warns his muscular bandana-wearing buddy to intercept the rookie, telling him to just intimidate the overachiever without actually breaking him. The meathead chuckles arrogantly, flexing his shoulders of steel and promising to go easy on the incoming speedster. But before the meathead can even finish his sentence, our guy's hand clamps onto his shoulder with a single, icy command to move. With a casual shove, the kid absolutely ragdolls the grown man, sending the stunned instructor stumbling off balance. Damien doesn't even break stride, blowing right past the disguised veterans and leaving them choking in his wake. He keeps his eyes locked dead ahead as the humiliated instructors scramble in a total panic, screaming at each other to block the absolute menace. Sure, these disguised veterans might have the experience, but our guy is out here treating them like literal speed bumps. He leaves them completely in the dust, proving that at the end of the day, a basic camp instructor is no match for a regressor's instincts. Back in the pack, Affle watches the kid break the sound barrier and can't help but laugh at the sheer absurdity of it. There's no way the blonde-haired prodigy is going to let himself be shown up by some random recruit. Kicking his own engine into overdrive, Affle blasts out of the formation, sprinting forward with incredible speed to close the gap. Seeing two absolute madmen completely shatter the pacing strategy, the rest of the applicants realize the unwritten rules just went out the window. Led by Affle, the entire mob of recruits transforms into a massive stampede, charging forward and kicking up a colossal dust storm. The sheer mass of bodies completely overwhelms the field, leaving the remaining instructors screaming as the endurance run descends into total anarchy. Over at the second parade ground, a couple of officers spot the rising dust cloud and realize they've got a seriously bizarre anomaly on their hands. They debate sending in backup to restore order, but a heavy set of footsteps from behind shuts that idea down instantly. Chief Instructor Raymond steps up, ordering his subordinates to stand down and let the chaos play out, because if these kids have the raw skill to break the exam, they deserve to pass. And as our boy continues to leave a blazing trail of dust in his wake, Raymond coldly notes that anyone who gets trampled by this new pace will simply fail. Raymond just smirks, thrilled that this kid is exactly the kind of unexpected variable he was hoping for. And sure enough, Damien's relentless pace has lit a fire under the rest of the recruits, spurring them into a full-blown stampede. A vision of a blood-soaked battlefield flashes through the chief instructor's mind, because the true leaders of tomorrow are the ones who know how to spark that exact kind of momentum. Back on the track, our hero is finally feeling the burn as he hits lap 29 out of 30, but he digs deep, shifting into a dead sprint for the final stretch. Suddenly, Affle effortlessly pulls up right alongside him. The blonde recruit asks if this was the plan all along, while our guy pointing out that Affle still looks suspiciously fresh. Glancing over at the dozens of normal applicants completely collapsed against the walls, Affle notes that if they hadn't been secretly using mana, they'd be eating dirt right now too. Sweat dripping down his face, Damien just smirks, firing back that if you've got a trump card, you'd be an idiot not to play it. Affle laughs, clearly amused by the sheer blunt pragmatism. With a final synchronized step, the two of them cross the red finish line together. An off-screen instructor stammers out the official verdict. They both pass. Meanwhile, in a plush office, an unseen bigwig wants the scoop on a certain new recruit making waves at the third training camp. The reporting subordinate confirms that Chief Instructor Raymond just flagged a literal 13-year-old joining the ranks. Tapping his desk, the boss notes that catching the eye of a hardass like Raymond is no small feat. Pushing up from his chair, the commander admits his curiosity is officially piqued. The eye-patch superior turns around, demanding to know the name of this pint-sized prodigy. Cut to the camp courtyard, where a massive crowd of recruits is swarming the notice board like it's drop day. It's a total gotcha nightmare for the rejects, who fall to their knees in utter despair after failing the selection process. Amidst all the crying and cheering, our boy stands there completely unfazed, wondering why anyone would celebrate getting drafted. He remembers it clearly. Back in his past life, forced conscription was a total death sentence where desperate men did anything to dodge the meat grinder. That was then. Shaking off the grim thought, our hero figures this timeline is still in its peaceful tutorial phase, right as a familiar voice calls out his name. Affle strolls up to congratulate Damien, asking if they're officially batchmates now. Our guy asks if the future legend managed to clear the cut, and the blonde boy confidently confirms that he even saw Damien's name on the passing list. The blonde prodigy points out that our boy didn't just scrape by. He's sitting pretty at the absolute top of the leaderboard. Affle suggests they watch each other's backs once they're officially in, forging an early alliance between two future heavy hitters. Strolling away from the board, Affle asks how our guy plans to spend the 1-week grace period before deployment. A serious look crosses the regressor's face as he vaguely mentions he has a few important errands to run. Affle playfully throws an arm around his shoulder to pry for details, but our hero smoothly brushes it off as a simple supply run. A mental image of the notoriously stiff military boots pops up as Affle advises Damien to stock up on foot pads before the standard-issue gear wrecks his soles. A phantom ache flashes behind Damien's eyes as he remembers his adult self agonizing over those exact blister-inducing boots in his previous timeline. He already knows the drill, but this guy plays the part of the grateful rookie perfectly and thanks his new bro for the pro tip. When the our boy asks Affle that what he is going to do in this grace period, he threw the same answer which our boy told to him. Affle whistles, shooting him a highly skeptical side-eye over the whole secretive act. The two boys wave it off and part ways, locking in a promise to meet back up at the training camp in exactly 7 days. But the second Affle turns his back, a mysterious cloaked figure silently materializes right behind him like a shadow out of nowhere. The cloaked elder, Alan, asks about the kid walking away, wondering who could have possibly caught his master's attention. Affle remembers it clearly. Back on the endurance course, he genuinely pondering what could drive someone with that kind of monster potential to enlist in the grunt forces. He had pressed Damien about his absurd mana reserves, pointing out that he was way too strong to be a normal recruit. But Damien had just flipped the script, casually calling out the blonde's own hidden power level with a cocky grin. Our casually remark that the military being the only place he belongs. Back in the present, Affle just smiles to himself, easily deducing that our hero is hiding some serious baggage. Turning back to the elder, the blonde recruit admits he has a strong gut feeling they're going to be bumping into that guy a lot. Alan respectfully agrees, addressing him with a noble title that completely shatters the illusion of Affle being a commoner. The young noble immediately snaps into a stern glare, ordering his servant to drop the formal titles while they're out in public. Quickly apologizing, the old retainer follows Affle through a stone archway, leaving the training grounds behind. Meanwhile, the comic cuts to the bustling streets of the capital city, practically overflowing with vibrant, peaceful life. Our guy wanders through the crowded market, genuinely stunned by how utterly normal and untouched the world still looks. Watching a customer try to haggle down a stubborn vendor, the mundane slice of life sharply contrasts with the dark reality he remembers. He remembers it clearly. In his past life, the capital was a grim wasteland of extreme poverty, where desperate beggars pleaded for a single crust of bread. Shaking off the bleak memory, Damien knows this peaceful atmosphere is on a 5-year timer before the Continental War shatters it completely, meaning he has to hustle. Striding through the bustling crowds, our boy sets his very first objective, tracking down the Yerk Trading Company. The veteran knows all too well that when the era of war finally drops, practical artifacts, weapons, and basic food rations will become the ultimate currency. And that is exactly where the massive merchant guilds step up to the plate. Damien remembers it clearly. Back in his past life, the wealthiest merchant operation on the entire continent was the Yerk Trading Company. In a dusty, sun-baked military camp from his previous life, exhausted soldiers slumped in the dirt, completely consumed by despair. Suddenly, the weary troops spotted a cloud of dust on the horizon, signaling the arrival of much-needed relief supplies. A massive convoy of covered wagons rolled through the barren landscape, bringing a sliver of hope to the front lines. As the carts drew closer, some of the grunts spat bitter resentment at the ultra-wealthy merchants, cursing them for lining their pockets while soldiers bled. But an older, battle-worn Damien rose to his feet to shut down the complaining, revealing to his men that the guild was actually donating those crucial supplies to keep the war effort alive. The blonde grunt backed down, admitting his saltiness was just the exhaustion talking. Still, dropping that much coin on consistent charity work was no small flex for the Yerk Trading Company. Captain Damien gave the green light, and his men eagerly scrambled to secure the payload. Just then, a gray-haired subordinate tapped his shoulder, pointing out the big boss of the operation. Damien followed his gaze across the bustling camp, locking onto a lone figure draped in a pristine white robe. Taking one look at the VIP, the subordinate couldn't help but throw some shade, whispering that the guild leader looked like an absolute snob. Back in the present, the comic cuts to a peaceful, sun-drenched town. Our hero leans against the brickwork, turning that old intel over in his head. The Yerk Trading Company had been rolling out the philanthropy long before the war even kicked off. Running the numbers like a true tactician, he figures he can filter the capital's 40 merchant guilds down to a solid top 7. Since they're known for throwing around serious charity money, our guy decides to target the heavy hitters first and hits the pavement. The sun begins to dip over the mountains as he grinds through his systematic citywide sweep. Completely gassed from the legwork, Bro finally drags himself to the very last wooden door on his hit list. He pushes the heavy wooden door open, calling out into the quiet building to see if anyone is around. A green-haired man steps up to greet the visitor, looking every bit the welcoming merchant. Our hero puts on his best polite face and spins a cover story about wanting to invest some serious coin into local charity work. The merchant eats it up, praising the young man's noble mindset, while Damien just prays this isn't another wild goose chase. Taking a seat, the man formally introduces himself as Yerk, the head of the Hamal Trading Company. That single name sets off alarm bells in Damien's head, and he introduces himself, convinced he's finally tracked down his target. Across the table, our guy cuts to the chase and asks if Yerk happens to have a son. Yerk just chuckles, clarifying that he only has one deeply immature daughter. The disappointment hits Damien like a ton of bricks and he slumps back, assuming this whole lead was a massive bust. But before he can excuse himself, the door suddenly bursts open behind him. His eyes go wide in shock as a cheerful voice rings out calling for her dad. A blonde woman strolls into the room, and as the vision of the white-robed head of the Yerk Trading Company from his past life overlaps perfectly with her face, Damien realizes Yerk's daughter is the exact person he's been looking for. Yerk does the honors, formally introducing our boy to deal across the dining table. The blonde future mogul offers a warm professional greeting to the young lord. Getting right down to brass tacks, she double-checks that he's actually here to drop some coin on their charity efforts. Damien narrows his eyes as the realization clicks. The legendary future guildmaster Yerk he remembers from his past life was actually a woman this whole time. Our hero's gears are turning, trying to figure out how this pretty face ended up running an entire financial empire under a fake male alias. Unaware of his mental lore drop, Deal keeps it strictly business, asking exactly how much capital he's looking to inject into their operation. Our guy doesn't even blink before casually dropping an absolute nuke of a number, stating he'll kick things off with a cool 300 gold. The father-daughter duo practically short-circuit, completely floored by the sheer weight of that bag. Yerk manages to scrape his jaw off the floor just enough to ask what exactly this kid expects in return for a king's ransom. Flashing a predatory little smile, Damien lays out his terms. He wants a partial stake in the Hamal Merchant Guild and a fat cut of the profits. Yerk just stares at him, absolutely bewildered that a 13-year-old is out here negotiating like a seasoned Wall Street shark. But the suspicion creeps in, and the older man has to ask the obvious question. Where exactly did a kid get his hands on that kind of capital? Without missing a beat, our guy smoothly spins a tale about wanting to put his late parents' inheritance to good use. Realizing he might have stepped on a landmine, Yerk immediately backs down, offering a polite apology for prying into family matters. Wrapping up the negotiations, the guild representative promises to run the terms by his associates and get back to Damien with a definitive answer. Stepping outside, Deal catches her father staring off into space, completely lost in thought. Yerk can't help but marvel at the sheer audacity of the meeting, utterly blown away by a 13-year-old operating on that level. A vision of those cold veteran eyes flashes in his mind, a heavy gaze that practically screams the kid is anything but ordinary. Shaking off the serious vibes, Yerk pivots to teasing his daughter, joking that if the boy were just a few years older, he'd be absolute husband material for her. Deal instantly turns the color of a tomato, flustered and screeching at her dad to drop it. But Yerk is having way too much fun, laughing it off and playfully suggesting that maybe the young lord is into older women anyway. A short time later, the business deals are traded for barracks as enlistment day finally rolls around. Standing outside the military base, our hero looks up at the clear sky, ready to embrace this massive fresh start. Reaching a hand up toward the sun, he makes a silent vow. He absolutely refuses to let this second chance at life go up in smoke. Clenching his fist, our guy doubles down on his ambition. This time around, he's going to swallow the entire empire whole. Stepping into the barracks of the 3rd Training Company's 1st platoon, he sizes up his new digs. He sweeps his gaze across the room, checking the crowd for any familiar faces. Tossing his bag onto an empty bunk, Bro feels a little bummed realizing his golden boy buddy Affle got sorted into a different unit. But his train of thought gets completely derailed by a booming voice echoing through the room. A towering wall of muscle fills the doorway, introducing himself to the squad as platoon leader Brian. With a sharp snap of his fingers, the officer kicks off a ruthless, zero-tolerance inspection of everyone's personal gear. Clenching his fist with a deeply unsettling grin, Brian promises that anyone caught smuggling booze or smokes is going to be dealt with in a highly entertaining fashion. Naturally, a bunch of sweating recruits immediately fold like cheap lawn chairs, coughing up their hidden stashes. Damien silently judges the absolute noobs as the platoon leader barks at everyone to dump their bags. Brian sweeps past our hero's spotless bunk, finding absolutely zero contraband. But the massive officer pauses, leaning in close to ask just how old this pint-sized recruit actually is. When our boy calmly drops that he's 13, Brian looks like his brain just blue-screened. Over on the next bunk, a blonde recruit with shaved sides scoffs, loudly complaining that the army is drafting literal toddlers now. Our guy shoots him a sideways glance, which only prompts the meathead to aggressively bark at him to watch his eyes. Our hero just closes his eyes, deciding it's an absolute waste of breath to get into a shouting match with an NPC. Instead, a dark vision flashes behind his eyelids as he mentally files the guy's face away, fully intending to show him exactly how hard a kid can hit. Suddenly, a bald recruit a few beds down violently shivers as an ominous chill runs straight down his spine. Brian looms over the sweating private, ordering him to empty his bag down to the last lint ball. Flashing a terrifying, shadowed smile, the platoon leader asks if he needs to dig through the gear himself. The terrified recruit frantically dumps the rest of his belongings onto the mattress, swearing on his life that's everything. Pivoting to face the rest of the room, Brian issues one final, ironclad warning. He promises that anyone caught hiding contraband will be running laps until their lungs give out, leaving the recruits picturing a night of endless, agonizing cardio. Watching the absolute panic unfold, Damien just flashes a smug smirk, thinking these scrubs are getting exactly what they deserve. Satisfied with the sheer amount of fear he's instilled, the muscular officer officially calls an end to the inspection phase. Moving right along, he announces that he needs to appoint a temporary student platoon leader to run the show whenever he's not around. Whipping a folded document out of his pocket, he starts scanning through the recruits' files. A genuinely impressed smile crosses his face as he notes that one absolute unit in their ranks passed the entrance exams with off-the-charts marks. He calls out the name Damien, demanding the high scorer step forward and claim his crown. The rest of the room instantly starts sweating bullets, terrified that the aggressive blonde meathead from earlier is about to be handed absolute authority. Brian actually walks right up to the Mohawk recruit to ask if he's the guy, but before the brute can answer, a calm voice pipes up from behind them. The platoon leader was completely stunned, his brain short-circuiting as he tried to figure out who else could possibly be an elite scorer. Brian whips around and looks down, way down, his jaw practically hitting the floor. The towering officer stammers out a reality check, asking if our boy is seriously the 13-year-old kid, which the young regressor casually confirms. That's all it takes for the blonde Mohawk recruit to absolutely lose his mind, throwing a massive tantrum over the military turning into a literal playground. Brian barks at the meathead to shut his trap, but the aggressive recruit refuses to back down, ready to die on this hill rather than take orders from a middle schooler. The blonde recruit keeps running his mouth, arguing that whoever takes charge needs to have actual proven leadership skills. Pointing a meaty finger right at Damien, the blonde recruit declares that their discipline will completely shatter if they let a literal child run the show. Our hero just flashes a smirk, deciding he's officially had enough of this guy's relentless yapping. Clapping back with zero hesitation, our guy casually states he'd do a way better job than some brainless meathead, which instantly sends the blonde recruit into a frothing rage. Before things can escalate, Brian steps in, finally addressing the loudmouth as Kyle. The massive officer reaches out and clamps a heavy hand down on the recruit's shoulder. With a single glowing red eye and an aura that screams murder, Brian squeezes the guy's shoulder, issuing a bone-chilling warning to never degrade a comrade again. All the fight drains out of Kyle in a split second, leaving him sweating bullets as he stammers out a terrified submission. Surprisingly, the platoon leader dials back the bloodlust, conceding that the meathead's point about needing proper leadership actually holds some weight. Emboldened by the validation, Kyle pitches an alternative idea, barely biting his tongue in time to stop himself from calling Damien a brat again. He formally challenges our boy to a one-on-one duel, declaring that whoever walks away the winner gets the leadership spot. Brian turns his attention back to Damien, asking if the young regressor is willing to agree to these terms. Our guy doesn't even blink, calmly accepting the terms while figuring this is the perfect excuse to beat some much-needed discipline into the ranks. Pointing a tiny finger right back at his challenger, Damien flashes a ruthless smile and asks if all he has to do is break the oversized meathead into pieces. Brian throws the question to the rest of the room, and the recruits absolutely roar their approval, hyped for a show. Wasting zero time, the officer marches the entire squad outside to the sparring grounds to settle things the old-fashioned way. Kyle smirks down at his tiny opponent, but our hero just stares back with absolute zero fear as the brutal duel for the top spot officially kicks off. Instructor Brian lays down the ground rules, making it crystal clear that the match stops the second someone taps out. Both fighters give the nod, locking in to throw down. With a booming shout, the sparring match officially kicks off. Kyle stretches his massive shoulders, fake pouting about how it feels like he's bullying a toddler, but our boy just tells the walking lump of protein to bring it on. A literal anime anger vein pops on Kyle's forehead as the disrespect hits his ego. Roaring that he's going to beat the kid like a stray dog for running his mouth, the meathead charges forward with glowing red eyes. Damien calmly watches the aggro rush, mentally noting that the guy's speed is actually pretty decent compared to the veteran soldiers from his past life. But that level of speed isn't nearly enough to touch a regressor, and our hero effortlessly sidesteps Kyle's heavy downward punch like he's strolling through a park. Kyle's eyes widen in pure shock, his brain short-circuiting as he realizes the kid hard-read his exact trajectory. Refusing to take the L in front of the squad, Kyle throws another wild hook, but to our guy, the movement is playing out in painful slow motion. Frustrated beyond belief, Kyle slams his massive fists together, promising to just crush the boy outright if he keeps playing dodgeball. He launches himself into the air for a devastating two-handed slam, but Damien casually steps right out of the AoE impact zone, letting the brute hit absolutely nothing but air. Kyle touches down on empty dirt, completely bewildered by the whiff, right before a voice whispers from his blind spot. Before the big guy can even turn around, Damien sinks a glowing mana-infused punch directly into his gut. Our boy watches calmly as the brute doubles over, knowing a direct hit with raw magic is usually a one-shot mechanic for a standard recruit. Surprisingly, Kyle manages to catch himself on the dirt, panting heavily but somehow keeping his HP above zero. Completely blinded by tilt, the massive recruit charges forward again, screaming that he's going to kill the kid. He unleashes a desperate flurry of wild swings, but our guy just leans back like he's in the Matrix, deciding it's time to wrap up this tutorial boss. With a sickening impact, Damien buries another devastating strike straight into Kyle's torso. Calling out the final hit, our hero watches the massive recruit finally give out, collapsing to his knees with an agonized groan. Kyle faceplants into the dirt, completely knocked out cold while the rest of the peanut gallery watches in stunned, breathless silence. Casually dusting off his hands, Damien dismisses the unconscious lump like it's just another Tuesday. Radiating a dark, absolutely menacing aura, he locks eyes with the terrified crowd and asks if anyone else wants to queue up for a beating. The remaining recruits sweat bullets, frantically shaking their heads in absolute, undeniable refusal. With zero takers stepping up to the plate, the instructor calls the match, officially crowning our boy as the undisputed platoon sergeant. Sometime later, a heavily bruised Kyle is finally discharged from the base infirmary. He trudges down the hallway, his ego completely shattered into a million pieces by the humiliating one-sided beatdown. He realizes he doesn't even remember what happened after taking that very first hit to the ribs, the grim truth sinking in that he was outclassed from the jump. Pausing outside the barracks door, he curses his own pathetic performance, having genuinely believed nobody in this entire camp could hold a candle to his raw strength. He shoves the door open, instantly startling the rest of the squad inside. The onlookers whisper nervously, terrified that the bruised meathead is about to demand round two and end up right back on a hospital cot. Ignoring the whispers, Kyle marches straight up behind Damien, calling his name in a low, heavy voice. But instead of throwing a sucker punch, the massive recruit drops straight to his knees, loudly declaring his absolute submission and pledging to serve the kid as his rightful leader. Our guy stares down at him in pure bewilderment, legitimately wondering if he accidentally gave the brawler permanent brain damage. Kyle earnestly explains that while his new boss is the youngest person he's ever fought, he's undeniably the strongest, and it's only natural to bow to a superior warrior. Listening to the heartfelt plea, Damien realizes the meathead actually has a solid sense of warrior's honor beneath all that muscle. Smiling, our boy waves off the formalities, telling the kneeling giant to drop the titles and just use his actual name. They shake on it, officially cementing a brand new bromance and locking in their status as the undisputed top dogs of the platoon. 1 week later, the recruits are getting absolutely smoked out in the field, enduring a blur of grueling physical training under the blazing sun. Pounding the dirt alongside Kyle, our hero notes that these brutal daily sweat sessions are at least making the time fly by. But as the session wraps up, Brian dismisses the squad to the barracks and singles out Damien for a little one-on-one detour. Sweating and thoroughly confused, our guy trails behind the instructor, racking his brain over what this sudden VIP summons is all about. The mystery march ends right at the heavy double doors of the administration office. Peeking inside, the kid quickly realizes he isn't the only recruit who scored an exclusive invite today. He slots into the lineup among the other platoon leaders, chilling out and waiting patiently for the big announcement to drop. Out of nowhere, the mocking recruit next to him decides to run his mouth, loudly roasting Damien's scrawny build while Damien compare the loudmouth to a literal toad. Our guy pictures a hilarious mental image of this skinny guy to stand toe-to-toe with a jacked monster like Kyle. The skinny guy asks our boy that why he is staring him, while Damien stares dead into the guy's face and casually wonders aloud just how far he could split those eyes open. The mocking recruit's ego shatters on impact, his face flushing red as he screams at the sheer disrespect. But before hands can be thrown, an armored officer steps to the front of the room and shuts the whole circus down, demanding absolute silence. The bully immediately folds, muttering a classic villain threat under his breath as the officer officially kicks off the briefing. He doesn't waste time dropping the main event. In exactly 1 week, every unit is throwing down in a massive platoon versus platoon team battle for their midterm assessment. The entire room barks their confirmation, the hype levels instantly spiking as the recruits get fired up for the upcoming bloodbath. Briefing complete, the officer dismisses the gathering and sends the newly minted leaders back to their barracks to prep. But the moment they step out into the hallway, the mocking recruit decides he isn't finished, stopping our guy dead in his tracks. Raising a fist, the oversized bully aggressively promises to beat some respect into the kid for failing to read the room. A couple of nearby recruits watch the pathetic display, openly criticizing the guy for trying to flex on a literal child instead of focusing on his own platoon. When the bully tells them to mind their own business, the brown-haired recruit calmly steps into the danger zone, warning the aggressor that he might be the one leaving on a stretcher. Completely ignoring the fuming meathead, the brown-haired recruit invites our hero to ditch the loser and walk away, which Damien happily agrees to. But after taking just a few steps, the young platoon leader suddenly freezes in his tracks. Our boy asks what platoon the bully belongs to, puffing out his chest to proudly reveal that he is the leader of the 4th platoon. A dark, downright villainous smirk spreads across Damien's face as he promises to commit that little fun fact to memory, telling the idiot he'll see him on the battlefield. Leaving the meathead in the dust, our hero continues down the hall with his new acquaintance. The brown-haired recruit explains that he's in the same platoon as Affle, meaning word of Damien's top-tier practical scores has already spread like wildfire. Introducing himself as Gerard, the 3rd platoon leader, he flashes a friendly smile and says he's looking forward to seeing our boy's skills in action. Moments later, Damien bursts through the doors of his own barracks, demanding everyone's undivided attention. The recruits blink in total confusion as their pint-sized commander marches straight to the center of the room. Conjuring a mental image of 2 massive armies clashing, Damien reveals the details about the upcoming inter-platoon team competition. Picturing himself planting a red victory flag while surrounded by cheering silhouettes, he declares with absolute certainty that they are securing first place, no matter the cost. Clasping his hands together, our guy tells his squad there is one crucial detail they need to remember about their 3 opposing teams. Spreading his arms wide like a maestro of chaos, Damien announces that their primary objective is the total, unadulterated annihilation of Squad 4. With his eyes glowing a menacing, demonic red, our boy drags a thumb across his throat, promising a very special kind of hell for Squad 4's leader. As Week 2 of boot camp kicks off, the vibe on the training grounds completely shifts. The formation instructor announces that it's time to learn unit tactics, dropping the heavy hint that formations are the absolute meta for the upcoming competition. And to sweeten the pot, he reveals that anyone showing off some exceptional individual skills will be handsomely rewarded with bonus points. Our boy's ears instantly perk up at the mention of extra credit, knowing damn well that high scores are the golden ticket to getting assigned to the best branches. Flashing a supremely confident smirk, our regressor is more than ready to put on a clinic. The lesson of the day is the triangle formation, a hyper-aggressive offensive strategy designed to punch right through enemy lines. A mental diagram flashes by, showing how the formation acts like a massive destructive arrow. But with one fatal flaw: if the vanguard gets folded, the entire backline collapses like a house of cards. Damien immediately glances over at Kyle, realizing the absolute unit of a blonde is the literal perfect meat shield to stick at the tip of the spear. Wasting no time, the instructor orders the recruits to split into 2 groups and put the theory to the test. Taking charge like the boss he is, my guy sends Kyle to lead the opposing side while he claims command over his own squad. Huddling his men together, Damien decides to leak a little tactical cheat code. He casually claims his military father taught him the ins and outs of the strategy, effortlessly bluffing his way into their absolute trust. He whispers a sneaky counter-strat designed to completely dismantle the standard triangle formation. The squad eats it up, grinning like a pack of wolves ready to test out their leader's new exploit. Stepping into the leadership role, our boy quickly organizes his ranks, slotting the heavy hitters right behind him and keeping the shorter recruits on the flanks. He orders them to lock their shields high over their heads, forging a tight, impenetrable wall of wood and sheer willpower. Across the dirt, our hero sizes up Kyle's squad as they lock into a thoroughly prepped defensive wedge. Completely unfazed, our guy commands his men to sprint straight down the middle, planning to end this farce in a single crushing strike. The referee instructor barks the command, officially kicking off the sparring match. Kyle's vanguard advances with a synchronized, disciplined march that would make any drill sergeant proud. Peeking from behind his own shield, Damien gives credit where it's due. Their footwork is surprisingly clean for a bunch of absolute rookies. But as the gap between the 2 squads shrinks, he screams for his front line to hit the gas and pick up the pace. The 2 walls of recruits barrel toward each other like runaway freight trains, building a massive bone-rattling momentum. And right before the point of impact, the regressor subtly cloaks himself in a crackling purple aura of pure mana, ready to flip the script. With his mana flaring, he roars the command to push just as the 2 lines finally collide. The wooden shields clash with a violent thud, completely halting Kyle's vanguard in its tracks. Straining against the crushing pressure, Damien yells for his men to execute the game plan. Instead of just pushing back blindly, his squad targets the gaps between the enemy shields, sparking instant panic in the opposing ranks. Spotting the perfect opening in the chaos, our boy decides it's time to make his move. He drops low and sweeps his spear shaft across the dirt in a vicious arc. The strike completely takes out the legs of the opposing front line, sending them crashing hard into the dust. Furious at his rapidly collapsing vanguard, Kyle screams at his guys to get back on their feet. Realizing his defensive line is totally broken, the big guy decides to just tunnel vision the enemy leader directly. He charges in and slams his shield into Damien, but our guy easily blocks the hit, casually reminding Kyle exactly who he's dealing with. Pushing with all his muscular might, the blonde recruit demands his rival get out of his way, and the regressor happily obliges, smoothly slipping his shield aside to let Kyle's own momentum betray him. Caught completely off balance, Kyle's aggressive charge hits nothing but air as our hero just steps out of the way. As the big guy stumbles forward, Damien ruthlessly bashes him in the back with his shield, sending the vanguard eating dirt. Standing over his defeated opponent, our boy calmly lectures Kyle on the importance of knowing exactly when to deploy his massive strength. From a distance, an observing instructor watches the flawless victory, thoroughly impressed by the display. The superior marvels at how this kid's tactical genius completely makes up for his painfully average teenage physique. Stepping onto the field, the referee instructor officially declares Damien's half of the squad the undisputed winners. Showing zero hard feelings, Kyle firmly grasps our guy's arm, swearing he'll take the W next time. The rest of the defeated recruits immediately swarm Damien, eagerly asking how they could have possibly countered such a brilliant strategy. Suddenly, the entire squad is fired up, enthusiastically discussing how to weaponize these tactics in the upcoming interplatoon competition. As the sun sets, the regressor proudly watches his men conduct self-directed training instead of immediately running off to the barracks to rest. But his peaceful observation is suddenly shattered when a hostile voice rings out, loudly mocking the squad leader's size. Damien turns around in surprise, only to find 2 massive silhouettes looming right over him. It's the peanut gallery from Squad 4, openly laughing their asses off at the idea of taking orders from a literal child. Kyle and the bald recruit immediately bristle, taking the disrespect entirely personally. But the rivals just keep digging their own graves, smugly mocking Squad 1 for having absolute rock-bottom standards. The Squad 4 leader steps right up to the plate, specifically targeting our boy for playing pretend as a leader. Damien recognizes the loudmouth instigator instantly, mildly annoyed that this NPC is practically begging for a beatdown. Deciding not to waste his breath on a nobody's cheap provocation, the regressor turns away and tries to order his men back to the barracks. But before he can even finish his sentence, a furious roar erupts from behind him. His entire squad completely loses their minds, screaming absolute bloody murder at the rivals for daring to disrespect their leader. The large blonde squadmate aggressively points a finger straight at the instigators, promising to end their miserable lives. The big guy looks down at our hero to double-check that these are in fact the Squad 4 bastards they need to destroy. Radiating pure demonic rage, the men crack their knuckles in unison, completely united in their absolute bloodlust. The trash talk completely backfires, hyping Squad 1 up to train straight through the night just so they can wipe the floor with Squad 4's faces. Watching his men pop off, our boy realizes this little stunt actually worked out perfectly. He flashes a downright sinister smile, absolutely thrilled by his squad's rabid loyalty. Meanwhile, far away from the dirt and sweat of the training grounds, a much quieter meeting is going down in the dark-haired commander's office. Commander Boris leans back at his desk, asking the chief instructor if any of the fresh meat are actually worth their salt. Chief Instructor Raymond gives it to him straight, reporting that while a few have decent potential, 2 trainees in particular are standing head and shoulders above the rest. He drops the bomb that despite being literal kids, both of them already know how to wield mana. Boris is instantly intrigued, pressing to know if these prodigies come from some kind of high-born noble background. The commander knows the brutal math of this world. Mana cultivation methods cost an absolute fortune, making it a completely inaccessible, unknown power to commoners. But Raymond confirms that both Damien and Aphel have completely ordinary, orphan backgrounds on paper, making their elite skills highly suspicious. Changing the subject, Boris asks about the recent commotion between the squads, and Raymond admits the whole mess centers right around Damien. A memory flashes back to moments ago. The older trainees were relentlessly mocking the kid for being a pint-sized squad leader. Instead of Damien taking the bait, his squad furiously stepped up to defend him, proving their absolute loyalty. The memory fades. Hearing about this ride-or-die loyalty, Commander Boris leans back, his curiosity fully ignited. Tapping his finger rhythmically against the desk, he proposes a brand new experiment. He leans in, whispering his sinister lesson plan directly to the chief instructor. Raymond immediately pushes back, warning that this could completely break the recruits, but Boris coldly states that if they shatter, then that's all they were ever worth. He reasons that if their newfound solidarity is truly that strong, it's worth pushing them right to the edge. In a terrifying hypothetical vision, the commander's glowing-eyed face looms like a demonic shadow over the tiny trainees, as he orders the training intensity for squads 1 and 4 to be cranked to the maximum level. Meanwhile, down on the dirt, Kyle and the rest of the boys suddenly break into a cold sweat, instinctively sensing the hellish trials that are about to drop on their heads. The rest of the squad groans as the news of their extra punishment sinks in, completely demoralized. Just picturing themselves dragging their bodies through the dirt under barbed wire sends a collective shiver down their spines. Kyle turns to Damien, asking if this extra dose of torture is actually fair. Our boy just sighs, already seeing right through the commander's little psychological game. Getting to his feet, our guy immediately shuts down the pity party. He reminds them that while eating dirt is going to suck, it's the perfect cheat code to build a massive physical edge over the other platoons. Hearing a literal 13-year-old drop that kind of gigachad wisdom instantly shames the older recruits into silence. The young leader flashes a confident smile, promising to carry them through the pain if they just trust him. When one nervous squadmate asks if they're seriously going to be crawling on raw gravel, our hero sarcastically asks if bro was expecting a 5-star mattress. Kyle narrows his eyes, pointing out that Damien sounds like a hardened vet who's done this a million times before. He remembers it clearly. In his past life, Damien spent countless hours eating dirt and crawling through the trenches just to survive the blood-soaked battlefield. Back in the present, a knowing smirk crosses his face, because he realizes physical conditioning isn't the actual goal of this drill. In his mind's eye, he pictures the grueling reality of the upcoming drills, knowing the brass fully intends to break their bodies on the barbed wire. He envisions the inevitable fallout. Frayed nerves causing a blonde recruit to snap and violently grab a squadmate by the collar as the exhaustion takes its toll. Snapping back to reality, our boy realizes this is nothing but a psychological stress test to see whether Squad 1 or the 4th platoon shatters first. Refusing to play right into the commander's hands, our guy kneels by his bed and orders everyone to grab their issued socks. His squadmates exchange thoroughly confused looks, completely baffled by the weird request. But Damien just grips the white fabric tightly, flashing a confident smile as he promises to show them a little magic trick that will absolutely save their skin. Cutting out to the training field, Squad 1 lines up in perfect discipline formation. Instructor Nielsen steps up to the plate, introducing himself as their worst nightmare for the day's crawling drills. He breaks down the mechanics of the low crawl, having an assistant demonstrate how to keep their bodies flat in the dirt while advancing with their spears. Then he points dead ahead to the brutal barbed wire obstacle course waiting to tear them apart. The recruits shout their readiness in unison, and Nielsen silently notes that they still have some serious fire in their eyes. A stark contrast to the miserable 4th platoon. Wasting no time, he barks the order for the first group to blitz the course. The boys hit the dirt, scrambling under the razor-sharp wire with the terrifying aggression of a squad possessed. Instructor Nielsen watches from the sidelines, secretly questioning why the commander would drop a brutal week 4 drill on them this early in the cycle. He fully expects the jagged gravel to shred their uniforms and slow their momentum down to a miserable, agonizing crawl. But a second later, the instructor's eyes practically bulge out of his skull. Instead of stumbling and crying, these mad lads are tearing through the obstacle course at absolute breakneck speed. Nielsen is completely stunned, his brain short-circuiting over the fact that this is supposed to be their very first time attempting the drill. Before he can even process the anomaly, an eager recruit snaps him out of his daze, hyped up and demanding to know when Group 2 gets to deploy. Given the green light, the second wave dives into the dirt with the exact same explosive high-octane energy. The mustached instructor watches in utter bewilderment, realizing these guys are scrambling through the trench like a pack of starving berserkers. Off to the side, our boy just chuckles to himself, knowing the veteran instructor has never seen a speedrun like this in his entire career. Once they clear the course, the squad gathers around Damien, laughing about how the hardest part of the drill was actually pretending to be in pain. They roll up their sleeves to reveal the genius life hack behind their success. Makeshift elbow and knee pads crafted entirely from their cut-up socks. The thick layers of fabric completely shielded their joints from the razor-sharp gravel, turning a literal torture session into an absolute breeze. Instructor Nielsen officially calls an end to the drill, completely oblivious to the squad's 200 IQ life hack. Walking back to the barracks, Kyle asks our guy where he picked up such a game-changing trick. Damien casually credits his late father for the knowledge, but immediately hits them with a stern warning. A vision of the mustached instructor screaming flashes through his mind. If they ever get caught using the pads, they'll be running laps until they puke. Kyle laughs in hearty agreement, slapping our hero on the back so damn hard it nearly knocks the wind out of him. Wincing, Damien brushes off the heavy-handed friendly fire, his mind already shifting toward the weapon racks and the upcoming shield and spear training. In his mind's eye, he pictures the kingdom's soldiers running drills. They're about to learn the kingdom's best spear technique, a martial art with a hilariously basic name that becomes absolutely devastating when fully mastered. He remembers it clearly. In his past life, that exact technique was his only path to survival on the blood-soaked battlefield. Pushing past his limits, he trained his body to the bone, eventually unlocking the art's true potential under the strict guidance of a mysterious cloaked master. Snapping back to reality, our boy smirks, wondering if that old psycho is still kicking around somewhere. Suddenly, the sound of miserable groaning echoes down the hallway as a group of battered recruits drags their exhausted bodies back from the training grounds. Kyle nudges our hero, pointing out that the 4th platoon just dragged their sorry carcasses across the finish line too. But unlike Squad 1's flawless run, these guys are having a total meltdown, with their blonde leader screaming at them to quit whining. Our boy and his squadmates just blink, watching the absolute circus unfold in real time. The battered recruits immediately snap back, ready to launch a full-blown mutiny over his arrogant attitude while they're out here bleeding from the gravel. Damien's squadmates wince at the friendly fire, realizing that toxic mess would be them right now if not for their makeshift knee pads. Across the hallway, a battered 4th platoon recruit glares daggers at Squad 1, absolutely mauling that they're over there chilling and completely unscathed. The blonde leader seethes, fully convinced that Damien's crew pulled some underhanded exploit to survive the hellish drills without a scratch. Clenching his bleeding fist, he swears he's going to make them pay for the humiliation. He promises that when the upcoming squad competition hits, he's going to completely crush Damien and snatch first place. The clock skips forward, and the morning of the highly anticipated tournament finally dawns. All 4 platoons assemble in the courtyard, standing in rigid formation as the instructors prepare to drop the official bracket. While they wait for the call, Kyle leans over and whispers to our guy. The vanguard squints down at him, murmuring that our boy feels completely different today. He tries to brush the shift off as a sudden growth spurt, a guess our hero casually plays along with. His squadmates crack up, telling the hulking blonde to lay off the height jokes when he's built like a brick wall. But internally, Damien notes that Kyle's raw combat instincts are terrifyingly sharp. Just last night he pushed his limits in the dark, successfully breaking through to the 2nd star of the Delft mana cultivation method. His relentless daily meditation had massively expanded his internal reserves, granting him a lethal hidden edge. Damien drops the casual act and calls out his vanguard's name. Locking eyes with the big guy, he declares that they aren't just here to win. They are going to absolutely dominate the field. In his mind's eye, he pictures the grand prize. The top 5 soldiers in this bloodbath get to walk into the armory and claim any piece of gear they want, while he imagines the other recruits scrambling to settle for basic, single-use C-rank enchanted weapons. Our guy has his sights set on a much bigger prize, recalling a juicy rumor from his past life. A vision of a specific, highly coveted ring flashes before him. An artifact with a continuous passive effect that easily bumps it up to a rank status. But to guarantee first pick, our hero knows he has to secure the absolute top spot before the blonde 4th platoon leader can snatch it away. Beside him, Kyle grins like an absolute maniac, fully on board with the ambitious plan. Smacking his massive hands together with a sharp crack, the vanguard turns to the rest of the recruits, roaring that their leader intends to completely crush everyone in their path. The squad erupts into a chorus of cheers, their morale burning hotter than ever as they buy into the hype. Right on cue, an announcer's voice booms across the field calling Squad 1 to the front for the very first match. Damien steps forward with his loyal crew at his back, ready to show the entire camp exactly why he's the undisputed boss. The rules of this little squad scrimmage are dead simple. One team goes on the offensive while the other turtles up. If the attackers can't snatch the flag before the clock runs out, it's an automatic L, and Squad 2 is up to bat first. Our boy calmly tells his platoon to stick to the script and trust their drills. He double-checks the game plan with Kyle, who is more than ready to flex his monstrous strength. With the shrill blow of a whistle, the war games officially kick off. Squad 2 charges out the gate with a ferocious battle cry, looking to absolutely steamroll the defenders. But they slam face first into a literal wall of wood and muscle, with Squad 1 holding their ground like an absolute fortress. The attackers are completely baffled by the impenetrable defense, sweating bullets as they realize there are zero gaps to exploit. Up in the VIP seats, the instructors note that Damien's tightly packed formation is a purely defensive strat. But our guy isn't just planning to sit there and take it, suddenly flashing the green light for his men to push back. Kyle lets out a primal roar, throwing his massive weight into the shield wall from the inside. The sheer kinetic force of the vanguard sends the entire attacking squad stumbling backward in a total panic. The man with grayish-blue hair leading Squad 2 is absolutely losing his mind, cursing out the defenders for having the audacity to advance. Catching the enemy completely off balance, our boy calls out to his personal vanguard. Kyle happily obliges, breaking from the shield wall to violently tackle a poor recruit straight into the dirt. The rest of the attackers can only watch in sheer horror as the blonde juggernaut scatters their ranks, sending bodies flying backward with nothing but a shoulder charge. But our guy isn't letting him go rogue, barking an order for Kyle to fall back in line and keep the pressure tight. Locked back into a solid wall, Squad 1 executes a synchronized devastating shield bash that violently shatters the enemy's front line. Squad 2 is left completely bewildered, unable to comprehend how a bunch of rookies are flexing this kind of flawless teamwork. Spotting the perfect gap in their crumbling defense, our hero screams for a full all-out charge. His squad crashes into the broken enemy lines like a freight train, violently launching bodies into the air amidst a massive cloud of dust. Up in the stands, the observing instructors are left totally speechless by the brutal efficiency on display. Platoon leader Brian watches the absolute slaughter, realizing these basic trainees are fighting with the coordination of elite battle-hardened veterans. And looking out over the chaotic melee, he knows exactly who is responsible for this miraculous transformation. Down on the field, our boy continues to bark flawless tactical commands, orchestrating the total dismantling of the enemy's formation. Brian remembers it clearly. Every single night, Squad 1 voluntarily stayed late in the barrack, with Damien personally ironing out every single one of their weaknesses. Now that grueling extra practice is paying massive dividends as the recruits maintain an unbreakable shield wall, executing their leader's teachings to the letter. Brian can't help but smile, deeply respecting the sheer undeniable competence of the young sergeant. Suddenly our guy spots a fatal opening in the opposing line and barks the attack signal. Kyle flashes a predatory grin, eagerly scanning the chaotic battlefield for his designated prey. The massive vanguard locks eyes with Squad 2's terrified flag bearer, looming over the poor guy like an absolute sleep paralysis demon. The targeted soldier completely loses his nerve, screaming for his entire team to abandon their offensive and just focus on blocking the incoming raid boss. Panicking hard, Squad 2 hastily clumps together, raising their spears in a desperate tightly packed defensive huddle. But instead of charging in like a wrecking ball, Kyle just stands there, leaving the terrified defenders totally bewildered by the sudden AFK behavior. The hulking blonde flashes a smug smirk, happily informing the opposing squad that they just fell right into the trap. The enemy soldiers freeze in pure horror as the realization finally crashes down on them. Suddenly, a blur of rapid footsteps blitzes up right behind the vanguard. Our boy doesn't even slow down, planting his boot squarely on Kyle's shoulder and using the absolute unit as a literal springboard. He catches massive air, vaulting straight over the tightly packed enemy defense like it's a casual game of leapfrog. Coming down like a meteor, the hero drives the butt of his spear squarely into the enemy flag bearer's chest. He ruthlessly pins the breathless defender to the dirt right as the referee calls time. Hoisting the captured flag high, Damien officially claims a flawless zero-casualty victory for his squad. Up in the VIP balcony, the instructors are absolutely blown away, already placing their bets on Squad 1 sweeping the whole tournament. But the wavy blue-haired instructor tells them to hold their horses. He points a gloved finger toward a completely different match happening on the far side of the field. Over in the dust, Squad 3 is currently holding down an absolute brick wall defense of their own. Meanwhile, the arrogant Squad 4 leader is throwing a massive foot-stomping toddler tantrum. The cocky jerk had fully planned to use Squad 3 as a light warm-up, but his guys are getting completely stonewalled. His exhausted vanguard is sweating buckets, unable to push the opposing shield wall back a single inch. From the absolute safety of the backline, the Squad 4 leader screams at his grunts to stick to the plan. But his men finally snap, screaming right back at him and proving their teamwork is officially dead in the water. Across the dirt, the young man with bluish-gray hair suggests they push the advantage, but the blonde prodigy calmly shoots the idea down. Affle casually explains that they just need to hold the line and let the enemy burn through their own stamina. The young man falls in line, internally marveling at how Affle can read the battlefield like a seasoned vet. Looking at the kid's flawless composure, he realizes Affle is no ordinary recruit and wonders what kind of crazy background he's hiding. Following the blonde boy's lead, the young man barks at the rest of the team to lock down their formation and keep the pressure on. Squad 4 throws their bodies against the wooden shields once again, but the defenders eat the impact without giving up a millimeter. The attackers are literally foaming at the mouth, begging the defenders to stop stalling and actually throw a punch. Peeking over the shield wall, the young man with bluish-gray hair notes that the enemy's HP and morale have officially hit zero. Right on cue, one of the frontline attackers reaches his absolute limit, his eyes rolling back as his legs give out. Seeing the perfect opening, the young man with bluish-gray hair finally gives the green light for the counter-offensive. Squad 3 surges forward with a unified battle cry, ready to clean house. They slam into the exhausted enemy like a freight train, instantly crumbling the 4th platoon's ragged defensive line. Knowing they need a finisher, the young man tags in Affle to deliver the final blow. The blonde prodigy sprints straight into the chaotic melee with his staff at the ready. Using a hostile wooden shield as a literal springboard, he launches himself skyward. He catches some serious air, soaring completely over the frontline defenders to bypass their vanguard entirely. While hanging midair, Affle channels a swirling vortex of raw magical energy around his weapon. He unleashes a massive sweeping AoE blast, violently ragdolling the remaining soldiers across the dirt. The arrogant Squad 4 leader can only curse in absolute despair as his team gets completely wiped, his dreams of an easy win evaporating on the spot. Across the field, our boy watches the explosive finish, taking mental notes on his future rival's ridiculous firepower. The referee officially calls the match, crowning Squad 3 the undisputed victors of the one-sided slaughter. As Affle gets hoisted into the air by his hyped-up squad mates, Damien has to admit the blonde kid is an absolute monster. Turning his back on the celebration, he realizes that Squad 3 is the only real threat left on the board. Radiating his own menacing purple aura, our guy flashes a dangerous smirk, eagerly counting down the seconds until their inevitable clash in the finals. Before Damien can get too lost in his anticipation, the gray-haired instructor barks at the recruits, officially ending their break. Kyle nudges his squad leader, confirming that their next match is against the desperate 4th platoon. The muscular blonde is practically vibrating with excitement to smash the face of the bastard who insulted Damien, but our boy calmly claims that target for himself. Turning to his squad, our guy points out that the enemy is already exhausted, and their teamwork is in absolute shambles. But rather than taking it easy, he orders his men to hit them even harder and crush them completely. Across the field, the 4th platoon recruits are running purely on spite, eager to make Squad 1 pay for their earlier humiliation. Damien's eyes narrow as he delivers his final, chilling instruction: end the match in an instant. His squad barks a hyped-up confirmation, fully dialed into their leader's ruthless strategy. Squad 1 lines up in perfect formation, shields raised and ready for blood. Opposing them, the blonde 4th platoon leader glares across the dirt, desperate to salvage his shattered pride. The tension snaps as the referee instructor officially signals the start of the match. Both sides explode off the starting line, their battle cries echoing across the training grounds. The two platoons barrel toward each other, kicking up a massive cloud of dust as they close the gap. Watching the enemy approach, our boy instantly diagnoses their sloppy square formation, realizing a basic charge would be more than enough to shatter their defense. But a simple win isn't on the menu. He wants to crush these guys so thoroughly they never dare look his way again. Barking a single command, our guy unleashes Kyle, who roars like an absolute beast as he launches an explosive charge forward. The blonde vanguard slams into the enemy line like a human wrecking ball, sending recruits flying backward from the sheer kinetic impact. Watching his front line instantly vaporize, the blonde 4th platoon leader screams at his men to put their backs into it and hold the line. He frantically barks out defensive orders, desperately trying to reorganize his shield bearers to protect their flag. But his desperate commands are cut short when he noticed that a heavy boot suddenly plants right on Kyle's shoulder. Leaping high into the air, Damien glares down at the arrogant leader, chillingly reminding him of his promise to remember his face. The opposing leader's eyes widen in sheer terror at the sudden aerial ambush. Before he can even process the threat, our hero delivers a brutal kick straight to his chest, sending him reeling backward. Humiliated and bruised, the blonde 4th platoon leader spits a furious curse at Damien, absolutely enraged at being looked down on. Refusing to take the L, the blonde leader angrily snatches a wooden spear from the dirt, screaming that he isn't just some training dummy. Believing size actually matters in a shonen battle, he lunges forward with a vicious thrust, shouting that a brat like Damien is nothing one-on-one. But to a regressor with decades of battlefield experience, the attack is painfully telegraphed, and our guy effortlessly sidesteps the strike. With terrifying calm, Damien catches the shaft of the spear barehanded, stopping the assault dead in its tracks and asking if that's really all he's got. The enemy commander gasps in pure shock as his weapon is forcefully yanked right out of his grip. Casually spinning the stolen loot, our guy mentally roasts the idiot for getting disarmed this easily. Closing the distance in a flash, Damien drives the blunt end of the staff right into the leader's sternum, completely knocking the wind out of him. Stepping heavily onto the defeated boy's chest, our hero's eyes glow an ominous red as he delivers a chilling lesson. Dropping your weapon on the battlefield is basically begging for death. Winding up his fist, Damien channels a surge of pink mana, telling the kid to carve this advice into his skull. He unleashes a devastating mana-infused punch straight to the leader's face, sending him flying backward into the dirt. As the rest of the 4th platoon panics over their unconscious leader, Damien just sighs, finding this whole boss fight incredibly underwhelming. Seeing the enemy commander knocked out cold, the referee instructor officially steps in to call the match. Raising his wooden staff high, the referee officially calls an end to the one-sided slaughter. The blue flag waves high as Squad 1 erupts into a deafening roar, claiming their undisputed victory. Kyle wipes the sweat from his brow, thoroughly satisfied with the absolute beatdown, while the rest of the boys hype up our hero's flawless leadership. Medics scrape the unconscious blonde leader off the dirt and onto a stretcher, leaving the spectating recruits in absolute disbelief that a 13-year-old just pulled off such a dominant sweep. Up in the stands, the veteran instructors are equally stunned, openly admitting that this kid's specs might already outclass their own. But as they nervously chuckle over that undeniable truth, a heavy, imposing voice suddenly cuts through their conversation. The staff violently flinches, whipping around to see who just managed to sneak up on their blind spot. Standing right behind them is the kingdom's elite 3rd Division training instructor himself, the legendary Leonhard Belkane. The lower-ranking instructors immediately snap to a rigid salute, enthusiastically barking out their praises to the kingdom. Completely ignoring their frantic salutes, the eye-patch-wearing legend turns directly to Brian, asking if the absolute menace down on the field is the same brat he had mentioned. Brian confirms it, and the two veterans look down just in time to see Damien getting triumphantly tossed into the air by his fiercely loyal squad. A dangerously intrigued smirk crosses Leonhardt's scarred face as he notes that a very interesting recruit has just entered their ranks. Later, back in the barracks, the blonde squadmate practically kicks the door off its hinges as he bursts inside with massive news. Our hero asks what all the yelling is about, and the breathless kid reveals that a massive VIP just touched down at the camp. The recruit paints a mental picture of a legendary 3rd Division instructor, imagining the towering VIP having all their regular officers standing as stiff as boards. Curious, our boy asks for the man's name, but the blonde recruit struggles to pull it from his memory. Piecing the clues together, Damien's eyes go wide as a very familiar name hits his tongue. Leonhardt. The recruit finally snaps his fingers as the memory comes to him, but our guy is already moving. Without a single word, our guy storms right out of the room, leaving his squadmates completely bewildered. He breaks into a dead sprint down the stone hallway, his heart practically hammering out of his chest. He desperately needs to see with his own 2 eyes if the impossible rumors are actually true. Skidding to a sudden halt, his breath completely catches as he spots the imposing, eye-patch-wearing legend walking right toward him alongside Brian. The veteran pauses mid-stride, immediately pointing out Damien and recognizing him from the sparring field. Brian throws his arms wide with a massive grin, cheerfully announcing that they were actually just on their way to find him. Snapping out of his absolute shock, our boy instantly locks his heels together and delivers a crisp textbook salute. Leonhardt steps right up to the recruit, his single piercing eye locking onto him as he asks to confirm his name. As Damien answers, the seasoned veteran studies him closely, clearly intrigued to finally cross paths with the young prodigy. But as our hero stares up at the towering commander, the ethereal phantom of his past adult self flares in his mind's eye, internally dropping the massive bombshell that this legendary man was once his greatest master. Leonhard Belkane doesn't beat around the bush, cornering our boy in the hallway to admit that Raymond's relentless hype made him curious. Staring down at the 13-year-old, the veteran is immediately struck by the dense purple mana radiating from his core. He praises our hero's refined spearmanship and casually asks which unit he hopes to join after graduation. Damien hesitates for a fraction of a second, before confidently declaring his intention to join the Neo-Caliphs unit. The answer completely blindsides both Leonhardt and his subordinate. The Neo-Caliphs unit is a notoriously brutal division tasked with suppressing the Dronzerian forest monster outbreaks, boasting the absolute highest casualty rate in the military. When Leonhardt asks why he'd choose such a hellish posting over a cushy administrative job, our guy simply states it's the best place to get stronger. Impressed by his insane grit, the eye-patch-wearing commander offers to write him a recommendation letter for the prestigious Knights, a position normally strictly reserved for nobility. But Damien politely declines the massive flex, revealing that he came to the 3rd Division specifically to find a certain man. Recognizing the unshakable resolve in his eyes, Leonhardt accepts the decision and dismisses him. As Damien walks away, the subordinate furiously complains to his commander about the kid throwing away a literal once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Desperate to fix this, the subordinate begs Leonhardt for permission to go talk some sense into the kid. But Leonhardt just smiles, deeply amused by the kid's intense veteran-like glare. He lets out a hearty laugh, utterly fascinated by the sheer, unyielding maturity radiating from a mere 13-year-old. Waving off the concern, he orders his subordinate to let it go, confident that as long as Damien is in the 3rd Division, their paths are destined to cross again. The very next morning, the training camp is buzzing with hype as the finals are officially announced, Squad 1 versus Squad 3. Gathering his team, our boy acknowledges that Affel's squad isn't going to be a walk in the park. But after weeks of hellish self-directed grinding, Kyle and the rest of the recruits are practically vibrating with confidence. Flashing a predatory smile, Damien orders his men to go out there and crush them just like always. The referee instructor blows the whistle, declaring that Squad 3 will take the offensive for the first half. Barking out orders, our boy keeps his men locked in a tight, disciplined march. Squad 3 watches as their opponents lock their shields together, recognizing the exact same impenetrable wall that effortlessly stonewalled the 4th platoon. Safely tucked behind that barricade, Squad 3 reminds their blonde ace Affel that their entire strategy hinges on him. With a synchronized earth-shaking stomp, Squad 3 begins their slow, inevitable march across the dirt. Squad 1 refuses to back down an inch, meeting them head-on and bashing into the wooden barricade with everything they have. As our boy screams for his men to push harder, the purple-haired Squad 3 leader smirks, fully convinced Damien's crew has fallen for the exact same predictable pattern. The enemy tactician waits for the perfect moment of maximum pressure before barking the signal for Affel to execute their counter-strategy. Like clockwork, Squad 3 seamlessly parts their front line, revealing the blonde prodigy standing ready with his spear. Damien gets shocked to see when Squad 3 is simultaneously opening their own formation. With his momentum already locked in, Affel dashes straight into the breach. He unleashes a devastating, sweeping strike that completely splinters a Squad 1 defender's shield. Rather than panicking, our hero's squad holds their ground, leaving the enemy commander completely bewildered. Affel's teammates cheer and surge forward into the gap, completely certain they've cracked the line. They only make it a few steps before finding themselves face to face with the towering absolute unit that is Kyle, dual-wielding massive wooden shields like a raid boss. Kyle lets out a terrifying roar and violently slams his barricades forward, single-handedly stonewalling the entire enemy advance with his monstrous brute strength. Our boy watches in horror as their momentum hits a literal brick wall. He realizes that while Affel's strike packs enough kinetic energy to launch a normal recruit into orbit, it barely even makes Kyle flinch. As the dust settles, Affel realizes he's been perfectly baited, and the giant vanguard is locked entirely onto him. A flashback hits Kyle of the night before the match where Damien gave his vanguard one single absolute directive. He told Kyle to ignore the rest of the chaos and focus entirely on neutralizing the blonde kid. Back in the present, the big guy flashes a menacing grin, absolutely thrilled to finally test his monstrous strength against the enemy ace. The blue-haired squadmate asks if he can break through the giant, and Affel grimly admits he has no other choice. Realizing that brute force alone isn't going to scratch this juggernaut, the blonde prodigy decides to stop holding back. He channels his mana, enveloping his wooden spear in a swirling aura of brilliant blue energy. With a burst of superhuman speed, he leaps forward, thrusting the glowing weapon directly at the defender's barricade. The impact triggers a massive shockwave, but Kyle digs his heels in and miraculously holds the line, sending Affel bouncing back into the air. Refusing to take no for an answer, Affel uses his mid-air hang time to rain down a relentless rapid-fire barrage of glowing blue strikes. The vanguard grunts in agony, his muscles screaming as he struggles to comprehend how a kid Damien's age can hit like a runaway freight train. Finally, with a devastating downward smash, the blonde prodigy completely shatters Kyle's wooden shields into a cloud of splinters. Winding up for the finishing blow, Affel declares that this little game of defense is officially over. Kyle stumbles backward, completely exposed and defenseless against the incoming magical nuke. But right before the spear can connect, our hero suddenly slides into the fray. Infusing his own shield with a subtle burst of purple mana, Damien perfectly parries the attack, triggering a blinding clash of magical energy. Affel's eyes widen in absolute shock as he recognizes the red-haired tactician staring back at him with cold, unyielding determination. Before either of them can escalate things further, a piercing whistle echoes across the clear blue sky. Damien and Kyle look up in surprise, the lethal tension abruptly cut short. The referee instructor bellows that the time limit has expired. Squad 3 failed to capture the flag, meaning they lose the first half. Affel clutches his chest in sheer frustration, realizing the big guy's insane tank build successfully stalled out the clock. Our guy immediately checks on his vanguard, finding Kyle drenched in sweat and running completely on fumes. He orders the absolute unit to sit out the second half, but Kyle stubbornly refuses, insisting his HP bar is still totally fine. Damien drops the smile, warning him that pushing his battered body past its absolute limit could actually jeopardize his graduation. Realizing he can't talk a brick wall down, our hero tactfully assigns Kyle to guard their flag in the backline. A 200 IQ move the Vanguard instantly recognizes as a way to protect his pride while forcing him to take a breather. Appreciating the respect, Kyle plants the red flag firmly in the dirt, promising that absolutely no one is getting past his aggro radius. Right on cue, the referee instructor orders the squads to switch sides, officially putting Squad 1 on the offensive. Turning to his exhausted but hyped-up squad, our guy reminds them that this is the final boss phase of the tournament. And since they're finally off the leash, Damien has absolutely no intention of dragging this out. His eyes narrow with absolute chilling certainty. He gives his squad a strict 5-minute speedrun timer to capture the enemy flag, leading the all-out charge to claim their undisputed championship. The referee instructor steps between the two formations, the tension on the dirt field thick enough to cut with a knife. Our boy stands at the vanguard, gripping his spear tight as he stares down the final hurdle of the competition. A montage of his recent tactical victories flashes through his mind. He's already proven his genius as a squad leader over the past few matches. But now this guy wants to carve his personal name into the minds of every instructor watching. And the fastest way to lock in his spot as the undisputed top trainee is to completely crush Squad 3. Surveying the enemy line, he immediately notices Affle hanging back, the blonde prodigy clearly exhausted from his massive magical aerial strike earlier. With their strongest asset playing defense, our hero knows a head-on collision is the only way through. The instructor's voice booms across the field, officially kicking off the final match. Wasting zero time, Damien barks an order for a full-speed charge right out of the gate. Squad 1 barrel across the dirt in a flawless wedge formation, their terrifying speed sending a shockwave of panic through the opposing ranks. The Squad 3 vanguard screams for their front line to lock their shields and brace for impact. It's too late. Our guy is already closing the gap, sprinting low to the dirt like a predator locked onto its prey. Channeling a surge of mana, our hero launches himself into the air, his spear erupting with a blinding purple aura. He brings the weapon crashing down with explosive force, punching straight through a defender's thick wooden shield like it's wet paper. Before the enemy can even process the splintered wood, Damien sweeps his shaft horizontally, violently swatting 2 more recruits backward into the dirt. With the shield wall completely shattered, our guy roars for his squad to exploit the opening. Absolute panic erupts through Squad 3's ranks as the wedge formation floods right into their exposed center. Desperate to stop the bleeding, multiple defenders thrust their spears at Damien from every direction. But with his veteran combat instincts firing on all cylinders, our boy effortlessly weaves through the coordinated strikes. The recruits can only gasp as their spearheads tangle together in empty space, completely missing their mark. Dropping low to the ground, Damien ruthlessly sweeps their ankles, sending the entire group crashing down in agony. With that, our boy screams for his men to regroup. Right on cue, Kyle and the rest of Squad 1 crash into the fray, completely overwhelming the scattered defenders with a heavy assault. Watching his front line collapse in a matter of seconds, Affle's teammate can only stare in absolute disbelief. But Affle remains coldly analytical, clocking that our boy is the absolute carry holding this entire assault together. Tossing the blue flag to his teammate, the blonde prodigy steps up to the plate to handle the threat himself. The brown-haired Squad 3 member nervously secures the objective, sweating bullets over having to rely on this kid to save their skin. Through the settling dust, our hero watches Affle approach, his eyes glowing with a fierce final boss intensity. A vision flashes through his mind. This very boy grown up to become the legendary Great General Affle Vanstrel. Proving his top-tier potential, Affle instantly lunges forward with blinding speed. Our guy's blood pumps with pure hype, eager to test his current limits against a literal future legend. He easily backsteps the strike as it shatters the ground, instantly reading the initial thrust as a clever feint. But bro just grins like a menace as his opponent immediately winds up for the real, heavy-hitting attack. The blonde prodigy brings his spear down, unleashing a massive energy-infused shockwave as their weapons collide. Yet to Affle's absolute shock, Damien catches the heavy blow dead in its tracks, completely halting the momentum. Realizing he's completely stat-checked in raw strength, Affle swiftly pulls his weapon back to reset his stance. But our guy isn't about to let up, his own weapon flaring to life with a terrifying surge of pink and purple mana. Challenging the future legend to give it everything he's got, Damien leaps high into the air for a devastating aerial assault. Affle can only stare in absolute horror as our hero swings down with impossible speed. The weapons clash with a deafening crack, the sheer crushing pressure of Damien's mana instantly threatening to snap the defender's spear straight in half. The blonde prodigy is violently forced backward, his boots skidding across the dirt as he questions how a mere commoner could possibly possess this kind of power. Sweat pours down Affle's face as his mind races, struggling to comprehend his opponent's masterful mana control. In his mind's eye, Affle no longer sees a fellow recruit. He envisions a massive shadowy figure radiating pure, suffocating despair. Confident in his absolute dominance, our boy casually strolls through the settling dust to finish the job. He raises his glowing weapon one last time, warning Affle that this final strike is completely unblockable. With a devastating mana-infused swing, Damien completely shatters the blonde spear into useless splinters. The sheer kinetic force of the blow sends the future legend flying, tumbling violently across the battlefield. Affle hits the ground hard, groaning in pain and total utter exhaustion. Without missing a single beat, our boy dashes right past his fallen rival. Face down in the dirt, Affle can only watch in frustrated defeat as the realization hits that he completely failed to protect the objective. The coveted blue flag flutters helplessly in the wind. A moment later, Damien triumphantly hoists it into the air, officially securing their undisputed victory. Left lying in the dirt, the blonde prodigy silently processes his crushing loss. As the dust settles, Damien casually strolls back over to his defeated opponent. Offering a hand to pull him up, our hero praises the match, while Affle respectfully vows to secure the W in their next encounter. Our guy just smiles, playfully suggesting they party up next time so he doesn't have to go through that raid boss experience again. As the blonde lightly punches his arm, Damien realizes that handing this future legend his first humiliating L might just be the catalyst that turns him into an even greater monster. For now, though, he decides to push those heavy thoughts aside and just soak in the sweet taste of victory with his squad. Up in the stands, Chief Instructor Raymond and the white-haired instructor observe the celebration, nodding in approval at the flawless conclusion to the tournament. Leonhart Belkane, however, watches with his single eye, ominously noting that this little era of peace is strictly temporary. Down on the field, Squad 1 hoists our boy into the air, completely oblivious to the brutal trials that are about to drop on their heads. But before the next phase of hell begins, the camp decides to throw the boys a bone with a massive feast, leaving Kyle absolutely speechless. Everyone is completely floored by the lavish spread of roast chicken and steak, realizing that winning the tournament was definitely worth the grind. Our boy watches his squad stuff their faces like there's no tomorrow, genuinely glad to see their spirits so high despite the sheer exhaustion. Looking toward the head table, he notices Leonhart has already dipped out, feeling a twinge of regret that he couldn't chat with his old master a little longer. Suddenly, one of the armored instructors approaches the table, asking if he can crash their victory dinner. Pulling up a chair right next to Damien, he double-checks if our hero is really sticking to his crazy decision to reject the legendary knight's offer. With a heavy sigh, the older man calls it a massive shame to pass up such a one-in-a-million opportunity. Then a sly little smirk crosses his face as he leans in, asking if our guy wants to hear a juicy secret. He remembers it clearly. Leonhart pulled Affle aside and offered the blonde prodigy a spot in the prestigious Knight Order as well. Back in the present, Damien doesn't even blink, calmly replying that he'll respect whatever path his rival chooses for his own life. Amused by the dry response, the instructor just bursts out laughing, calling this guy a seriously boring kid for having zero dramatic reaction. Seeing that there is absolutely no changing this stubborn teenager's mind, the older man finally decides to drop the subject and let him eat. The armored instructor raises his glass of wine, demanding the entire dining hall's attention for a quick toast. He gives the boys their flowers for surviving the past 2 weeks but warns them to brace themselves because tomorrow the real grind resumes. The hall erupts into a massive unified cheer for the kingdom, letting the hype wash over them for one brief night. And just like that, the montage skips ahead, dropping the recruits right into their third and final week of boot camp. Out on the dirt, the instructors push the trainees to their absolute physical limits with relentless sweat-drenched spear drills. Taking a breather, our boy scopes out the other squads and immediately spots a massive shift in their overall vibe. Getting utterly styled on in the tournament served as the ultimate wake-up call, leveling up the discipline of the entire third training camp. Finally, a whistle blows, granting the exhausted recruits a desperately needed 5-minute breather. Kyle immediately jogs over to his boss, practically vibrating with the urge to spill some fresh camp tea. The muscular blonde reveals that the 4th platoon's morale is completely in the gutter, and their dropout rate has absolutely skyrocketed. They both share a ruthless laugh over the fact that the arrogant 4th platoon leader packed his bags and rage quit the second the competition ended. But Damien casually taps Kyle's arm, cutting the comedy short, to remind his vanguard that clowning on the losers isn't what they need to focus on right now. He addresses the surrounding trainees, dropping a harsh reality check that their individual scores are the real metric dictating their future placements. Our boy knows full well that every single commoner recruit here is dreaming of the cushy palace administrative soldier assignment. But with only 30 application spots for 160 grunts, the internal competition is an absolute bloodbath. Kyle nods along, acknowledging that pretty much everyone signed away their lives for that exact same golden ticket. Then the blonde vanguard suddenly panics, grabbing Damien by the collar as the horrific realization hits that his boss's flawless scores make him a massive threat. As Kyle frantically shakes him back and forth, our hero calmly denies the accusation, stating he has absolutely zero intention of going to the royal palace. He points out that securing a palace job just means being cooped up inside a fancy cage all day. Kyle admits the desk jockey life sounds a bit suffocating, but argues it's still the most prestigious assignment on the board. Damien just scoffs, telling the musclehead that a guy like him who loves throwing his weight around would literally die of boredom behind a desk. Genuinely curious, Kyle asks where the undisputed top trainee is actually planning to go. Without missing a beat, Damien confidently declares that he's joining the Neo-Callets. Kyle screams in absolute disbelief, turning to the rest of the squad to loudly announce that their fearless leader has officially lost his mind. Our boy swiftly shuts down the dramatic outburst with a ruthless kick straight to Kyle's shin. Crouching in the dirt and nursing his bruised leg, the blonde musclehead just chuckles, realizing his gut feeling about his squad leader was dead on. He bursts into a hearty laugh, calling Damien an absolute madman, and declaring that's exactly why he vibes with him so much. When the break whistle blows, a fired-up Kyle rallies the rest of the troops, hyped beyond belief that they are officially down one major competitor for that cushy palace desk job. Fast forward a few days, and the grueling boot camp finally wraps up as the recruits gather in the courtyard for their discharge assembly. Standing at attention in the pristine formation, our hero reflects on how ridiculously fast the whole enlistment period flew by. Commander Barris takes the podium to deliver the standard graduation speech, urging the boys to keep pushing their limits for the glory of the kingdom. A quick whisper from Gerard snaps our guy right out of his nostalgic train of thought. The entire battalion snaps to attention, delivering a crisp, synchronized salute to officially put a bow on the ceremony. But before anyone can pack their bags, the clipboard instructor steps up, announcing that it's finally time to reveal the top 5 trainees of the cohort. The recruits swallow nervously, sweating bullets as they wait to hear who secured the coveted number 1 spot. A bright smile flashes across Damien's face as his name rings out across the courtyard, officially crowning him as the undisputed top dog of the camp. Aphel is called up next, easily locking down the second-place spot. Kyle, Gerard and Alex round out the top 5, swelling with pride as their names echo through the ranks. An instructor immediately orders the elite quintet to follow him, dropping the bombshell that they'll each get to choose one piece of equipment from the armory as a reward. Standing before the heavy iron doors, the instructor turns to Damien, giving our boy the honor of first pick. Our hero eagerly pushes the door open, having waited for this exact moment since he first set foot in the camp. Stepping inside, he takes a second to appreciate the neatly organized rows of weapons and military supplies. He briefly inspects a potion bottle, wondering if there's some hidden, overpowered treasure tucked away in the corners. But he quickly shakes off the distraction, deciding to stick to the script and grab exactly what he came for. Striding purposefully down the aisles, his eyes are locked onto a very specific shelf. Reaching up, he snatches a small item from the top, a satisfied smirk spreading across his face. It's a magic ring that grants temporary invisibility, a little secret a subordinate from his past life had tipped him off about. As he heads for the exit, he notes that the other recruits wouldn't even realize its value, since none of them have the mana required to activate it. Back outside, an instructor calls Aphel up to make his selection. Our boy watches him closely, recalling that in his past life, Aphel was the one who originally sniffed out the invisibility ring. With his destined prize hijacked, Damien eagerly wonders what the blonde prodigy will settle for instead. But his curiosity turns to pure shock when Aphel strolls out of the armory almost immediately. A cold sweat breaks out on our guy's face, stunned that the kid didn't even need to browse. Kyle asks if he's okay, but Damien quickly brushes the concern aside. His eyes are completely locked onto the small item in Aphel's hands, recognizing it in a heartbeat. It's an ancient seal bearing the crest of a fallen kingdom, the true secret behind how Aphel learned to wield mana. As a glowing ethereal crest flares behind the boy in Damien's mind, the realization hits him. Aphel's hidden heritage is far deeper and way more dangerous than he ever imagined. Stepping out into the armory courtyard, Chief Instructor Raymond checks to make sure every recruit secured their single reward. Aphel presents his chosen seal, innocently claiming he just felt a divine power radiating from the metal. The veteran nods, identifying the artifact as a ward against misfortune. He then praises the rest of the squad for picking out solid, artisan-crafted weapons. But when he turns to our boy, Raymond raises a skeptical eyebrow at the seemingly basic silver band. The instructor warns the top trainee that the jewelry only offers a minor weight reduction. Playing dumb, Damien slips the band onto his finger to test it out. Instantly, our hero leaps into the air, leaving literal afterimages as his body feels light as a feather. Landing smoothly, he assures the instructor that the effect is actually much better than he expected. Grinning to himself, our guy realizes he just scored a dual-purpose, a rank artifact that grants both weight reduction and total invisibility. With the armory loot settled, Raymond orders the squad inside to finalize their branch applications. Sitting at the desk, Damien is handed his official placement form. Without a second thought, our boy scribbles down his target, the notoriously brutal Neo-Callets unit. Watching over his shoulder, Chief Instructor Raymond internally weeps at the wasted potential, knowing this absolute unit belongs with the Knights. But the deed is done, and our guy hands over the completed paperwork to officially seal his fate. The armored veteran issues a grave warning about the absolute meat grinder he just volunteered for, which our hero respectfully brushes off. With a final, heavy pat on the shoulder, Raymond acknowledges his insane month of hard work and officially dismisses him. Stepping out of the office, the red-haired teen completely closes the door on his time as a lowly trainee. Strolling down the hall, he takes a second to reflect on the bittersweet feeling of leaving this place behind, only to hear a familiar voice call his name. Affle marches right up to him, looking dead serious and ready for answers. The blonde prodigy demands to know why Damien just threw away a guaranteed golden ticket into the prestigious Knight Order. Then he shares his own massive update. He officially accepted Leonhardt's recommendation, and is heading to the Knights himself. Damien just smiles and pats his destined rival on the shoulder, genuinely praising the 200 IQ career move. Affle can't help but chuckle at the sheer irony of this guy hyping up a path he literally just rejected, admitting that Damien is truly built different. But the blonde prodigy's smile fades as he extends a hand, warning our hero that the Neo-Calics unit he just signed up for is a literal death trap. The two prodigies clasp hands firmly, locking in a promise to cross paths again on the battlefield. Watching the blonde teen walk away, our guy wonders if Affle has any idea of the massive destiny waiting for him. In his mind's eye, Damien envisions the monstrous legendary General Affle is fated to become, radiating an aura of absolute power. Shaking off the hype vision, our boy decides it's time to bid a proper farewell to the rest of his platoon. He steps into the Squad 1 dormitory, finding his victorious team lounging on their bunks. Instantly, Kyle spots him and rushes over with his arms wide open like an oversized, excited puppy. The massive brawler throws an arm around Damien's shoulder, visibly relieved that their leader didn't just dip without saying goodbye. But the vanguard flashes a cryptic grin, leaving a heavy hint that they'll be seeing each other much sooner than expected. Before Damien can even question the Seuss comment, Kyle grabs his shoulders and rallies the entire squad to attention for a final address. Damien looks over the boys he led to victory, shedding the tough guy act to sincerely thank them for trusting his command. The dormitory erupts into wholesome cheers as the squad wishes their legendary leader the absolute best of luck on his crazy new path. With the wholesome farewells wrapped up, our boy slings his bag over his shoulder and hits the road toward the capital. But he barely makes it out of the gates before a familiar voice calls his name, stopping him dead in his tracks. Our boy glances back, completely baffled by the sudden interception. Turns out it's Deal, the future head of the Hamal Trading Company, greeting him with a warm, business-ready smile. She wastes zero time, escorting our hero straight to her office to hammer out the paperwork for his massive financial play. Sitting across from him, the blonde businesswoman gets right down to brass tacks, confidently projecting a solid 3% return on his net revenue. Damien scans the meticulously organized documents, genuinely impressed by the sheer competence radiating from this future tycoon. When she politely offers to clear up any questions, our guy just slides the paper back onto the table, completely satisfied with the setup. He gives her the absolute green light to proceed, casually mentioning that his late parents' insurance payout will be arriving shortly. Deal tries to bring up the fine print of their detailed agreement, but Damien just raises a hand to cut her off. He delivers an absolute gigachad line, boldly declaring that contracts are only for people who expect problems, and he trusts her implicitly. Deal is completely taken aback by the teenager's sheer audacity, instantly realizing she's dealing with a truly unique breed of investor. To back up his massive flex, our boy slides a heavy ornate box right across the table. Deal pops the lid and practically chokes on her own breath. Instead of the agreed-upon 300 coins, this absolute madman casually tosses over 500 gold just as a little tip for her hard work. Panicking, she frantically tries to revise the paperwork to match the new amount, but our hero just raises a hand and shuts it down. Flipping through the documents, he silently tips his hat to her professionalism, respecting how she treated him like a VIP instead of some clueless kid. Trying to recover her composure, the blonde businesswoman shifts gears and asks where the Academy's #1 draft pick is getting deployed. Damien doesn't even blink as he casually reveals that he's heading out west to join the infamous Neo-Calics division. Her jaw practically hits the floor, absolutely horrified that the top trainee would willingly volunteer for a literal suicide squad. Our guy just flashes a sly smirk, morbidly joking that if he gets wiped out, the massive investment defaults straight to her company anyway. But Deal isn't laughing, her face hardening as she sternly scolds him for treating his own life like a punchline. A nervous sweat drop rolls down the teen's cheek as he realizes this sweet merchant actually has a razor-sharp edge to her. Getting back down to business, she asks for his deployment schedule, and Damien confirms he ships out in exactly 3 days. Standing up, Deal promises to put his massive fortune to excellent use. With a respectful bow to conclude the meeting, she leaves our boy completely satisfied that his financial future is locked in. With the business side of things officially handled, the teen decides to spend his last 3 days of freedom living like an absolute king. The comic cuts to a quick montage of our guy spending the next 72 hours gorging on street meat, chugging ale, and sleeping wherever he pleases. Finally, the big day arrives, and Damien stands at the edge of the forest, fully packed and ready to march into hell. He double-checks his gear, taking a deep breath to mentally prepare himself for the unknown. But before he can take a single step, he senses a massive, all-too-familiar presence creeping up right behind him. Our hero turns around, utterly exasperated, as a booming laugh echoes through the trees. Kyle steps out of the brush, fully geared up and grinning like a total maniac. The massive brawler firmly grabs Damien's shoulder, refusing to let their brotherhood end at the training camp. Throwing an arm around his exasperated leader, Kyle reveals the crazy truth. He also enlisted in Neo-Callets, ensuring Damien won't be surviving this hellhole alone. Our boy and Kyle are just about to hit the dusty trail and head into the woods, when a familiar voice yells out, stopping them dead in their tracks. It's Deal. Pulling up completely out of breath but looking super relieved she managed to catch them before they dipped. Our boy is totally baffled by her sudden spawn, especially when he gets a load of the massive haul she dragged along. The future merchant queen proudly presents a fully decked-out VIP carriage to make their brutal trek to the border a total breeze. She explains the ride is absolutely packed with premium rations and survival gear, leaving our hero scratching his head at the 5-star treatment. Flashing a fond smile, she hits him with a reverse Uno card, explaining she's just returning the favor for his massive no-strings-attached investment. The Hamal Trading Company always pays its debts, and she literally spent the last 48 hours grinding to gather all this premium loot just for him. Kyle is seriously impressed by her top-tier logistics as she wishes them a safe deployment. Getting a little flustered, Deal tries to play it cool, nervously framing the whole care package as a strict business move just like he told her to do. Our guy just chuckles to himself, realizing her poker face is absolute garbage but finding the terrible lie surprisingly endearing. Dropping a final farewell, Damien and his vanguard finally hit the road to face whatever nightmare awaits them at the border. Deal watches in silence as the carriage rolls out, carrying the two prodigies toward the brutal front lines. The ride itself is anything but smooth, the carriage rumbling across the bumpy plains toward a distant walled settlement. Inside the cabin, Kyle looks absolutely green, cursing the bone-rattling roads while our boy calmly points out it beats walking. Rolling up to the wooden gates of our call, they immediately notice a massive red flag. There's an eerie absence of any civilians. Leaning back with his hands behind his head, Damien guesses the locals are either hiding from monsters or out foraging in the Dronzerian forest. A vision of peasant women gathering herbs flashes by as he explains that most of our call's residents make their living by harvesting a specific plant called a mancho. The mental image shifts to a feverish, poisoned man, illustrating that while the raw herb is highly toxic, it becomes a vital and expensive painkiller when processed correctly. Hopping out of the carriage, our guy notes that since the forest supplies 60% of the kingdom's amancho, the locals have no choice but to risk their lives for the trade. Shouldering their massive packs, the two recruits head into the town to track down their new base. Their heavy boots echo down the deserted, mist-shrouded streets. Suddenly, Kyle stops dead in his tracks, his tough guy act cracking as he looks incredibly nervous. He points at a dilapidated, imposing stone fortress looming in the fog, praying to whatever gods are listening that it isn't their destination. While Kyle questions if a stiff breeze will knock the place over, our boy's senses lock onto something way more concerning. The heavy, metallic stench of blood hanging in the air. Kyle instantly tenses up, pointing out movement in the mist. A group of shadowy figures slowly shuffles into the town square like extras in a survival horror game. But as they step into the light, the horror becomes real. It's a squad of battered, exhausted soldiers practically painted in their own blood. A close-up on a dented pauldron confirms the grim reality, proudly displaying the insignia of the Neo-Callets unit. Damien watches in dead silence as the grim-faced leader limps right past him, carrying the weight of a massacre on his shoulders. The traumatized squad disappears into the pitch-black maw of the fortress entrance without a single word. Kyle is visibly rattled by their 1,000-yard stares, but our guy just lets out a heavy, knowing sigh. He gives his vanguard a harsh reality check, warning him to get used to the gore. Because in this meat grinder, life and death battles are just a daily commute. The suffocating atmosphere hangs heavy over our hero as he watches them go. Suddenly, he is yanked straight into a memory from his previous life. Decades ago, as a battle-hardened commander, he stood before his troops and asked them to name a soldier's absolute most important duty. His men fired back with the textbook answers. Following orders to the letter, efficiently slaughtering the enemy, or taking down 20 foes before going out in a blaze of glory. The seasoned commander just closed his eyes in silent, heavy disappointment. He immediately smacked a reckless, dark-clad soldier right on the head for even suggesting a suicidal blaze of glory. He flat-out told his troops that throwing their lives away was the absolute worst answer, and that their one and only real duty was not dying. With burning intensity, he ordered them to never treat their lives lightly. Their only job was to survive and make it back, no matter what. He drilled it into their skulls that they had to get stronger for that exact reason, so they wouldn't end up as corpses on a battlefield. Back in the present, Damien smiles bitterly, the tragic irony stinging as he remembers how every single one of those loyal men ended up dying anyway. Shaking off the heavy ghosts of his past, our boy tells Kyle it's time to head inside, though the massive brawler is suddenly dragging his feet. Our guy hits him with a dead serious look, reminding his towering vanguard that they came to this hellhole for one reason only, to get stronger. Kyle stammers, pointing out the absolute suffocating despair radiating from the battered squad that just walked in. But our hero completely ignores the warning, marching straight toward the ominous stone entrance without missing a beat. Left with zero options, the blonde powerhouse scrambles to catch up with his fearless leader. Cutting inside the barracks, the atmosphere is instantly explosive as an angry, dark-haired soldier violently hurls his gear onto a wooden crate. He screams about the brass feeding them garbage intel, recalling a brutal ambush where they were swarmed by over 30 orcs and a literal orc wizard. A bandaged soldier grimly adds that Sergeant Charles's arm is barely hanging on by a thread, and without immediate healing he's looking at a forced discharge. But here in the Neo-Calit's unit, a penal battalion for the kingdom's worst offenders, a discharge isn't a free ticket home. A bleak vision flashes of a shackled prisoner illustrating the dark reality. Getting kicked out just means rotting in a cell for the rest of their natural lives. Or, as another bloody vision shows, they stay and get worked to the bone on the battlefield until they're violently tossed aside. The furious soldier curses the rigged system, demanding to know how a crippled man is supposed to survive on the outside. The shouting is abruptly cut short by Captain Taran, who calmly steps in and orders them to call for a doctor and request a priest from the temple. One of the men anxiously points out the fatal flaw in that plan. Their meager meat shield paychecks can't possibly cover a priest's exorbitant healing fees. Without a single word of hesitation, Taran drops a heavy pouch of 20 gold onto the cot and tells the men to chip in the rest. The squad is absolutely stunned, knowing full well that money was saved up for his mother's surgery. But the captain just offers a gentle smile and insists her condition has improved enough to wait. The battered men can only stare at their selfless leader, completely overwhelmed by the weight of his sacrifice. Moved by his unwavering loyalty, the rest of the squad eagerly empties their pockets, tossing whatever coins they have onto the pile to save their brother. Even the youngest kid in the squad, a gray-haired teen in armor, timidly holds out his tiny handful of copper, instantly drawing a loud bark from an older, scarred veteran. But there's no real heat behind the yell. The veteran affectionately orders the kid to put his money away and buy some new boots instead. The young recruit just clutches his pouch tighter, dropping his gaze as he guiltily confesses that Sergeant Charles only got hurt trying to protect him. That absolute purity is enough to make the hardened veteran choke up, while Taran takes charge and finalizes the order to fetch a priest from the temple. As a soldier sprints out the door to get help, the captain calls out to the young recruit, addressing Dionel by name. Placing a heavy, reassuring hand on the 18-year-old's shoulder, Taran reflects on how it's already been a full year since their youngest brother enlisted. He breathes a quiet prayer that Charles can hold on just a little longer, but the tender moment is suddenly shattered. Another soldier bursts into the barracks, urgently announcing that the highly anticipated batch of new recruits has finally arrived. The entire squad instantly tenses up, their minds flashing to terrifying visions of the absolute bloodthirsty criminals about to join their penal battalion. Taran just blinks in surprise, openly admitting that the sheer chaos of their recent ambush made him completely forget about the incoming rookies. Shaking off the fatigue, the captain calls Dionel over to his side. Throwing a brotherly arm around the young soldier, Taran leads him toward the door to go see exactly what kind of fresh meat the military sent them. He tells the kid it's time to go welcome his new juniors, completely oblivious to the fact that our boy and his blonde vanguard are currently waiting on their doorstep, ready to turn this entire suicide squad upside down. Captain Taran sits at his desk, sizing up the two fresh faces the military just sent his way. He immediately notes Kyle's massive muscular build, marking the blonde recruit as a solid asset. But then his gaze shifts to the literal child standing next to the human tank. Taran is completely baffled to learn that our boy is only 13 years old. The commander wonders why a kid 5 years younger than their youngest soldier would willingly volunteer for a suicide squad. Tossing the paperwork aside, the captain admits he just can't understand how kids these days think. Kyle immediately steps up to defend his leader, proudly declaring that our guy was the undisputed top graduate of their training camp. The official just scoffs, making it brutally clear that camp scores mean absolutely nothing out in the meat grinder. He asks our hero if he truly understands the danger he just walked into, and Damien calmly confirms he does. Realizing he's not going to talk them out of it, Taran calls for Dionel. Barking out an order, he tells the silver-haired soldier to assign the rookies their bunks and put them straight to work cleaning. Dionel gives a curt nod and tells the two to follow him. The silver-haired soldier marches our boys down a dreary, stone-cold hallway toward their new quarters. Along the way, Dionel lays down the law, explaining that this penal battalion couldn't care less about traditional military ranks. In this meat grinder, the chain of command is based on one thing and one thing only: who has managed to cheat death the longest. Pushing open the door to a dusty, bare-bones barracks, he tells them to pick whatever bed they want, tossing in the ominous caveat that they won't be using them for long anyway. Kyle immediately scowls, demanding to know what the hell that's supposed to mean. Diurnal glances back over his shoulder, dropping the heavy detail that despite being stationed here for a full year, he is still the absolute newest member of the squad. Before the big guy can even process the math on that, Diurnal whips out a brutal kick straight to Kyle's leg, forcing the absolute unit down to his knees. Looming over the grounded recruit, the veteran delivers the bone-chilling truth. Every single rookie who enlisted after him is already dead. Kyle just grits his teeth in stunned, tense silence, while our hero stands off to the side, completely unbothered by the terrifying reality check. Having successfully established the pecking order, Diurnal orders them to unpack their gear and scrub the barracks spotless, promising to drop the rest of the lore dump later. The heavy wooden door clicks shut, leaving the two fresh meat recruits entirely alone in the dreary room. Kyle immediately starts mauling over their new superior's toxic attitude, but his rant gets cut short when he hears our guy quietly chuckling to himself. Annoyed, Kyle demands to know what could possibly be so funny about their miserable situation. Our boy just smiles to himself, completely unfazed by the grim warning. Completely ignoring his squadmate's frustration, Damien grabs a rag and casually suggests they might as well get to cleaning. He points out that if they're going to do a job, they should go all out and do it right. Flashing a cheerful grin, our guy officially declares this menial janitorial chore to be their very first mission. Furious that his elite vanguard skills are being wasted on maid duty, Kyle aggressively snatches the cleaning rag right out of the hero's hand. Meanwhile, the story cuts to the canteen where Diurnal sits entirely alone, looking incredibly stressed. Clasping his hands tightly together, the silver-haired soldier quietly admits to himself that he's absolutely terrified. A flashback takes him to a chaotic forest battle during his early days in the unit. Acting as a confident mentor to a nervous new recruit, he confidently told the kid to stay back and watch. But that arrogant confidence was shattered in a single, horrifying instant. Diurnal stared down at the lifeless body of the boy he swore to protect, the brutal realization crashing down that one moment of carelessness was fatal. Back in the present, Diurnal sees neocalites for what it truly is: an absolute meat grinder where a mangled corpse is the only retirement plan. Letting out a heavy sigh, he admits he completely stopped looking after the rookies, knowing that getting attached in a suicide squad just leads to more pain. Yet as an image of our boy flashes in his thoughts, Diurnal can't shake the nagging feeling that this particular red-haired kid is built entirely different. His brooding session gets cut short when the local shopkeeper calls out to hand over his freshly repaired boots. Tossing some coins on the counter, the veteran tries to push the doomed recruits out of his head. The chatty NPC merchant won't let it go, casually gossiping about a pair of totally clueless-looking guys wandering outside the base earlier. The old man actively roasts them, scoffing that the newbies looked so incredibly useless he assumed they were just bottom-tier Defense Corps fodder. Not even bothering to defend his new subordinates, Diurnal just hits him with a polite bow and dips out of the shop. Stomping back to the barracks, the silver-haired soldier hardens his resolve, deciding it's his duty to properly crush their spirits into dust. Out here in the trenches, main character traits like pride and motivation are just a fast-track ticket to an early grave. Pushing open the heavy wooden door, he fully expects to find the room still looking like a certified disaster zone. Instead, his eye snaps wide open in absolute system-crashing shock at what's waiting for him inside. Our boy turns around, rocking a smudge of dirt on his cheek, and cheerfully welcomes the veteran back to the dorms. Diurnal just stares in absolute disbelief, his brain fully short-circuiting as he takes in a barracks that is literally sparkling clean. Two other soldiers walk up behind him, equally mind-blown, and ask just how ruthlessly he whipped these rookies to get this kind of result. Sweating bullets, Diurnal stammers out a weak denial, swearing he didn't do a single thing. Meanwhile, our guy eagerly holds up a bucket, asking his senior to inspect their handiwork and point out any missed spots like a total teacher's pet. Diurnal's mind races, knowing full well that normal recruits just push a broom around for 5 minutes and call it a day. Terrified by this unnatural level of dedication, he starts wondering if they're using malicious compliance to wage psychological warfare against him. Suddenly, a booming laugh echoes from the doorway, making the silver-haired soldier flinch. Captain Taran steps into the room, laughing his absolute heart out at the pristine, unrecognizable state of the barracks. The other soldiers whisper in sheer shock, completely floored to see their notoriously stoic commander actually showing positive emotion. Still chuckling, Taran waves the two overachievers forward. He looks between them, asking if they really managed to scrub this entire disaster zone spotless all by themselves. Leaning in, Taran asks why they went to such insane lengths when they could have easily just faked it. Standing at perfect attention, our boy smoothly credits Diurnal, claiming they were simply following their senior's orders to the absolute letter. The captain studies them, relying on his years of grueling battlefield experience to read their true depths. He notes that Kyle's monstrous physique means the big guy could be thrown into actual combat with minimal training. But when he looks at Damien, the veteran commander draws a complete blank. He just can't fathom why a top-tier prodigy would willingly walk into this absolute hellhole. Deciding to figure that mystery out later, Taran turns around to address the rest of the stunned unit. Throwing his arms around the two stiff rookies, he cheerfully announces that they are officially the newest members of the squad. And despite all the grim warnings, Damien and Kyle can't help but crack a smile as they are finally welcomed into Neo-Calit's. Years ago, in a dimly lit barracks, a fellow soldier asked Damien when their endless war would finally end. Our guy gave him the cold hard truth: it would only end if they surrendered. But his comrade ignored the cynicism, looking him dead in the eye and demanding that Damien not die before he did. Damien tried to brush off the heavy sentiment, but his friend just chuckled and insisted he make the promise. Back in the present, our hero lies awake, reflecting on how he never actually gave the guy an answer. He remembers it clearly. He stood over that same comrade's heavily impaled corpse on a grim battlefield. He technically kept the promise, surviving long enough to leap into the air and violently strike down an enemy soldier with his spear. The memory fades, leaving our boy staring at the ceiling, frustrated by the ghosts of his past. Unable to shake the restless energy, he decides there's no point in trying to sleep, and opts to practice his mana cultivation instead. He slips out into the quiet night, heading for the dark woods near the base. His solo training session is put on hold when he spots a silhouette swinging a blade in the distance. Peering through the gloom, he realizes it's Yahello, fiercely hacking away with a massive sword. Watching from the bushes, our boy realizes Yahello was a massive practice nut even back in his past life. But seeing the swordsman resting on that massive blade, our guy can't help but cringe at how terribly it synergizes with his speed-based fighting style. He remembers how impossibly stubborn Yahello was about his gear in his previous life, chuckling at the thought of getting swung at if he tried to correct him now. Deciding not to ruin the tiny bit of favor he's managed to scrape together, Damien quietly walks away, leaving the advice for another day. The next morning, the Suicide Squad gathers at the base of a jagged, towering mountain range for some grueling physical conditioning. With Captain Taran running late, the Neo-Calit seniors decide to kill time by starting a betting pool. Silver coins start flying as they eagerly place wagers on exactly how fast the fresh meat will break down and pass out. Overhearing the blatant disrespect, Kyle bristles, absolutely fuming at how much they're looking down on them. Damien just watches the undisciplined circus unfold, noting how completely cooked the unit's atmosphere really is. Without a word, he leaves a confused Kyle behind and strolls right up to the gambling ring. Slipping into the circle like a ghost, Damien startles the absolute life out of the veterans and casually asks to join the fun. Recovering from the jump scare, the seniors just laugh in his face, mocking the rookie and asking if he even has the coin to play with the big boys. He tells the group he's absolutely in, but he wants to tweak the rules of engagement just a bit. Flashing a literal gold coin, our guy confidently declares he's going to crush everyone on the mountain today and take first place. He casually asks if they want to add any more stakes, earning a collective scoff from the peanut gallery. The veterans crack up at his sheer audacity, agreeing to throw their entire pooled pot against his gold. But they want a pound of flesh in return. If the rookie loses, he's doing all their laundry for a solid month. Completely unfazed, Damien politely asks to tack on one final condition of his own. If he wins, he wants a full month of free time during scheduled training hours. A demand so unhinged it leaves the seniors completely speechless. Before they can shoot it down, Captain Taran suddenly speaks up, officially greenlighting the outrageous wager. The scarred commander then turns his attention to Yahello. With an amused smirk, Taran orders the gray-haired swordsman to throw his hat in the ring too. When Yahello hesitates, the captain immediately goes for the throat, asking if he's actually scared of getting smoked by a junior. His pride stung, Yahello defensively denies it, claiming he just didn't want to waste his cash on a foregone conclusion. Taran casually tosses a coin over to the gray-haired swordsman, covering his buy-in and completely removing his last excuse to back out. Turning back to our boy, the scarred captain formally locks in the terms. If the rookie actually manages to outtrain the veterans, that coveted free time is all his. But Taran isn't done raising the stakes, flashing a wicked smirk as he promises the seniors an absolute nightmare of extra training if they let a fresh recruit show them up. That threat is all the motivation the Neo-Calit seniors need, and they immediately lock their sights on our hero, vowing to crush this arrogant upstart into the dirt. Standing completely unfazed surrounded by glaring veterans, our guy internally smirks. Because this whole wager was never actually about scoring some extra nap time. He takes one look at the slouched, demoralized postures around him, and realizes that the only way to cure this Suicide Squad's rotting, hopeless atmosphere is to completely shatter the status quo. With the stage set, the captain steps up to the base of a towering rocky mountain and officially kicks off the day's physical conditioning. He points to a massive stack of thick wooden logs, cheerfully informing the unit that they'll be lugging these heavy timber blocks all the way to the peak. The seniors immediately start whining, loudly protesting that this kind of grueling grunt work is supposed to be reserved strictly for the fresh meat. Taran aggressively shuts down the pity party, barking at them to grab a log and start moving before he really loses his temper. The brutal death march begins, with the squad forced to haul the massive logs up the unforgiving steep incline. And it doesn't take long for the gravity of the situation to kick in, leaving the veteran soldiers sweating bullets and gasping for air under the crushing weight. The veterans grumble among themselves, utterly baffled by Taran's sudden shift to hardcore conditioning. They immediately point fingers at the fresh meat, fully expecting the rookies to buckle under the strain in record time. But as they glance around to check on their supposed dead weight, they realize a certain someone is completely missing from the pack. Way up the trail, our boy is absolutely booking it, sprinting up the jagged incline with his massive log like it's made of styrofoam. A quick look at his hand reveals the ultimate cheat code. His A-rank invisibility ring isn't just making his own body lighter, it's reducing the weight of whatever he's holding. Damien flashes a wicked grin, incredibly satisfied with his armory loot. Reaching a high ridge, he pauses to check the rearview mirror. The so-called veterans are still miles down the slope, barely crawling along, but he spots one guy actually putting in the work to close the gap. It's Yahello, pushing himself to the absolute limit just to keep our hero in his sights. The gray-haired swordsman is gasping for air, the realization hitting him that the kid is already at the finish line. Yahello thought he was just dealing with a top-tier trainee, but watching this absolute monster scale the peak forces him to rewrite his entire power-scaling chart. Damien effortlessly plants his log at the summit, claiming first place and officially dooming the seniors to a world of pain. Captain Taran stares at our guy, genuinely stunned that the rookie actually pulled it off. And as Yahello finally stumbles up to the peak in second place, the scarred captain realizes they just scored a recruit who's vastly more dangerous than anyone anticipated. Stepping up to the edge of the cliff, Taran bellows down to the struggling stragglers, officially calling an end to the climb. He coldly reminds the exhausted seniors of the stakes, ordering everyone who lost to the newbie to hit the dirt for their promised hell training. But before the brutal punishment can even begin, a panicked trainee frantically calls out to the captain. The terrified soldier points a trembling finger back down the mountain, screaming for Taran to look at their base. The captain's eyes widen in absolute horror as he spots it. A crimson flag snapping in the wind over the unit building, signaling a catastrophic Grade 1 emergency. Outside the imposing gates of the Neo-Calit's base, the peace is shattered as a sudden crisis hits the penal battalion. Inside, Captain Taran is already demanding answers, wanting to know exactly why the Grade 1 emergency red flag was just raised. The report is an absolute disaster. A group of civilian herb gatherers has suffered heavy casualties deep inside the restricted Dronzerian forest. Yahello curses the sheer stupidity of civilians wandering into forbidden territory. But the reporting subordinate reveals that the gatherers were actually escorted by 6 mercenaries, and they still have zero clue what kind of monster wiped them out. Wasting no time, Taran turns to Aaron for an immediate headcount. He orders 50 able-bodied men to assemble on the double, instructing them to leave the lightly wounded behind. Internally, the captain is sweating. The deployments are getting way too frequent, and he suspects the forest's entire ecosystem is mutating into something far more lethal. Out in the courtyard, the suicide squad stands in disciplined formation, ready to march into hell. Taran barks the order to gear up and move out. But suddenly our boy boldly steps up to the plate, volunteering himself and Kyle for the deadly mission. Taran shuts him down instantly, sternly reminding the rookies that a real bloodbath is nothing like their little training camp. But our guy refuses to take no for an answer, pitching a compromise where he and Kyle just tag along as rearguard luggage carriers. Captain Taran closes his eyes, the bitter reality chewing at him that his penal battalion is actually desperate enough to need a couple of kids. Swallowing his pride, he gives them the green light but lays down an ironclad rule: absolutely zero combat. He orders Yahello to toss the rookies the spare gear and get moving. As our hero catches his massive rucksack, the name of their destination sparks a serious sense of déjà vu. He remembers it clearly. In his past life, Yahello had warned him about a literal demon lurking in those exact woods. At that time, Damien had completely scoffed at the fairy tale, but the veteran wasn't joking around. Yahello described the terrifying demon as a force of nature, brutally slaughtering everything in its path. The absolute unit was so overwhelmingly overpowered that the soldiers had no choice but to tuck tail and abandon their post. Yahello bitterly confessed that this single, unstoppable beast was the sole reason the Neo-Calit's unit was originally wiped off the map. Back in the present, our guy sweats under the weight of his pack, his brain doing mental gymnastics trying to reconcile his past life intel with this current timeline. With the lore getting entirely too messy, he resolves to use this luggage boy gig to investigate the truth of the forest firsthand. Captain Taran does a final gear check, making sure the boys are strapped and ready to roll. He hammers home the golden rule of the penal battalion, ordering them to avoid unnecessary aggro at all costs. Echoing our hero's own past life philosophy, the captain stresses that making it back alive is their absolute top priority. With the pre-game speech wrapped up, the Suicide Squad marches out of the fortress gates. Our boy breaks into a determined grin, hyped to finally get a taste of real combat in this new life. The platoon pushes into the lush green valley, splitting into tight three-man search grids to comb the perimeter. Damian and Kyle fall in line behind a veteran squad leader, playing the part of obedient pack mules. At first glance, this restricted zone looks like your average run-of-the-mill woodland. But the second they cross the tree line, an icy chill spikes down our guy's spine. 5 years of grinding through hellish battlefields in his past life have hardwired his brain, and right now his veteran instincts are absolutely screaming at him. He white-knuckles his dagger, realizing this seemingly peaceful forest is radiating the suffocating pressure of a literal war zone. Suddenly a sharp whistle pierces the silence, stopping the squad dead in their tracks. Captain Taran doesn't waste a second, sprinting straight toward the source of the noise. One of the vanguard soldiers flags down the arriving squad leader, pointing ahead. What they find is a complete massacre, with mangled bodies and pools of blood painting the forest floor. Inspecting the dropped gear, Taran realizes the previous search party didn't even try to fight back. Whatever hit them had them so paralyzed with fear that they abandoned their weapons entirely. The captain stares up at a violently splintered tree trunk, his mind racing to comprehend what kind of absolute unit could snap solid wood like a twig. Aaron nervously asks if a local bear monster did this, but Taran immediately shoots that theory down. Nothing in this ecosystem packs that kind of raw physical power. The soldier tries to pivot his guess to an ogre, but gets abruptly cut off. Our boy steps up to the plate, pointing his dagger at a massive carcass half buried in the brush. It turns out to be a giant red bear, completely shredded by gouging claw marks so deep they look like trench lines. Breaking down the crime scene like a seasoned detective, Damian deduces that an even larger, apex-level beast has to be the one responsible for the carnage. Taran is genuinely blown away, staring at the 13-year-old rookie who just delivered a spot-on tactical analysis with zero hesitation. Realizing he's acting a little too much like a battle-hardened veteran, our guy smoothly covers his tracks, feeding the captain a flawless lie about learning everything from his hunter father. Kyle blinks in confusion, opening his mouth to point out that Bro's dad was actually a soldier. But our boy shoots him a death glare so terrifying it instantly forces the blonde recruit to swallow his words. With the mood turning grim, Captain Taran makes the tough call to fall back for the day, ordering the squad to carefully collect the bodies of the fallen so they can be returned to their families. Damian silently agrees with the tactical retreat, knowing full well that pushing forward blind against an unknown apex predator would be absolute suicide. Watching the veteran lead, our hero reflects that despite his gruff exterior, Taran is a genuinely excellent commander. The captain barks at the men to move quickly, desperately trying to get his squad out of the kill zone. Suddenly Damian's veteran instincts scream at him, and he frantically yells for everyone to take cover. Out of nowhere, a massive boulder crashes directly into the formation, creating a shockwave that blows Taran and his men completely off their feet. Absolute chaos erupts as soldiers scream in agony, the devastating surprise attack leaving legs crushed and the squad completely disoriented. Panic spikes as Damian screams Kyle's name, watching the absolute madman sprint directly toward the incoming danger. Planting his feet, the blonde powerhouse uses his insane physical strength to move a massive boulder completely barehanded. Our guy immediately rushes in to back him up, unleashing a burst of mana to help push back against the crushing weight of the rock. Together, the two rookies manage to hold the colossal rock at bay, stopping it from completely flattening the squad. Captain Taran frantically barks orders, directing the rest of the men to pull a trapped comrade out from underneath the crushing weight. The heavily bleeding soldier is dragged out of the danger zone. Taran curses at the grim state of the man's injuries, but Damian steps right in, pulling a medicinal herb from his pack. Our hero instructs the wounded soldier to chew on the leaves to dull the excruciating pain. Taran immediately snatches the plant away, warning that the herb is highly toxic without a neutralizer. But our guy is already 10 steps ahead, calmly revealing he brought the exact seeds needed to neutralize the poison. As the injured men chew the makeshift remedy, the captain just stares at the kid in utter disbelief, completely baffled by his veteran-level survival knowledge. There's no time to marvel though, as Damian urgently warns Taran that the boulder didn't just fall. It was thrown, meaning the attacker is right on top of them. Right on cue, heavy earth-shaking footsteps echo through the trees, freezing the blood in their veins. Out of the shadows, a gigantic, terrifying bear monster with glowing red eyes looms over the squad, finally revealing the true nightmare of the forest. The frontline grunts freeze in absolute terror as a massive shadow completely eclipses the sun. The commander screams for everyone to draw their steel and brace for impact. A colossal black bear monster with glowing red eyes steps out of the tree line and unleashes an earth-shattering roar. Wasting zero time, the beast swings a massive paw that forces the squad to scatter like bowling pins. Captain Taran immediately barks out tactical orders, telling the unit to secure the wounded and focus all aggro on the monster's legs. A burly soldier named Helson steps up to the plate, confidently declaring he'll handle the opening strike. He charges in with a battle cry, swinging his heavy axe with absolutely everything he's got. The weapon bites into the monster's thick black fur, drawing a satisfying spray of blood. But Helson's confidence completely shatters when he realizes his ultimate attack barely chipped the beast's health bar. Sprinting forward, Taran screams at the axe wielder to snap out of his shock and move. Unfortunately, it's way too late. The giant bear rears up, casting a deadly shadow over the paralyzed soldier. With a sickening thud, the beast's massive paw smashes directly into Helson's face, sending him straight to the shadow realm. The force of the blow launches Helson backward like a rag doll, his weapon spinning uselessly into the dirt. As he groans in the grass, the massive beast closes the distance to finish the job. It raises its razor-sharp claws high into the air, winding up for a brutal execution. But Captain Taran slides in at the last possible second, catching the crushing weight of the paw on his blade. Glancing back at his bleeding squad, the captain realizes they absolutely cannot let this raid boss walk away alive. Gritting his teeth against the immense pressure, he furiously barks at the remaining men to launch their counterattack. The Suicide Squad swarms the monster from all sides, desperately stabbing their weapons into its thick hide while their leader holds the aggro. Meanwhile, a veteran soldier throws his sword arm out in front of our boy and Kyle, keeping the rookies safely out of the splash zone. Slashing his blade to draw blood, Taran calls out to Dianel to set up a synchronized combo. The gray-haired soldier steps right into the pocket, delivering a devastating upward slash that carves a massive gash into the beast's arm. The monster throws its head back with an agonizing roar, its massive frame finally staggering under the coordinated DPS. Unable to support its own weight, the giant bear completely gives out, crashing heavily to the forest floor. The captain doesn't waste a second, raising his blade to his face as it begins to hum with a lethal vibrating energy. From the sidelines, our boy's eyes widen in shock, instantly recognizing that familiar pulsing aura. Launching himself high into the air, Taran brings down a massive glowing slash, executing the towering beast with a single mana-infused strike. The exhausted soldiers immediately erupt into cheers, gleefully kicking the massive corpse to celebrate their hard-fought victory. Taran, however, isn't joining the party, his eyes locked on the beast's thick fur as he wonders how something this ridiculously strong just appeared out of nowhere. Brushing the matted hair aside, he uncovers a cluster of strange cracked black spots spreading like rot across its skin. One of the men nervously pipes up, asking if they just exposed themselves to some kind of contagious plague. Catching sight of the commotion, our hero steps closer, and a chill runs down his spine as he immediately recognizes those ominous markings. The gears turn in his head, realizing this completely explains the abnormal bear's sudden spawn and unnatural power scaling. His expression darkens, internally noting that they need to track down the exact origin point of this mutation immediately. Completely unaware of the danger, Taran orders Aaron to set up a perimeter, and tells Brent to start peeling the monster's hide to craft some makeshift armor. Before they can make a fatal mistake, our guy suddenly cuts in, shocking the squad by flat-out warning them that the tainted skin is completely unusable. The entire squad freezes, and Taran looks back at the rookie in dead silence. Realizing our guy actually knows what they're dealing with, the captain asks for confirmation. Trusting the kid's judgment, Taran immediately cancels the loot drop and tells Damien to follow him. Packing up their gear, the squad heads back to base, leaving the tainted corpse behind. Cutting to the barracks, Taran brings our hero into his private office and tells him to take a seat. He skips the small talk, asking exactly what the teen knows about the black spots on the monster. Damien doesn't sugarcoat it, dropping a lore bomb by bluntly stating that the beast was poisoned by magi. Taran is visibly shook, asking if he means the forbidden power wielded by dark wizards. Stressing the gravity of the situation, the captain points out that dark magic is strictly outlawed, making this an absolute nightmare scenario. Bro calmly explains that there could be a dark wizard camping in the forest, or an abomination radiating the toxic energy. He remembers it clearly. A vision of cultists worshipping demonic circles burned in his mind, a grim reminder that magi was a cursed power that guaranteed a miserable death for anyone exposed to it. Back in the present, Damien knows that the Dronzerian forest is actually hiding a tainted mana stone, wondering if the timeline of the impending disaster is already starting to shift. In his past life, a vision of future military notices flashed in his mind. The existence of that tainted stone was only discovered after a massive disaster shook the empire. A sudden realization hits our boy. What if this exact moment is the very beginning of that tragedy, meaning they can still destroy the stone if they act before it spreads? Back then he witnessed visions of corrupted beasts, learning that magi only grew stronger as it poisoned more monsters. Taran narrows his eyes, suspiciously asking how a 13-year-old recruit knows so much about forbidden magic. Our guy smoothly lies without missing a beat, claiming his father went through a similar experience and passed down the stories. The captain accepts the excuse, grimly admitting that their unit is so desperate right now they have to grasp at straws. Cutting to the next morning, the gloomy atmosphere of the stone-walled Neocalit's base remains unchanged. Inside the barracks, Damien cheerfully wakes up an exhausted Kyle while the older soldiers groan about their sore muscles. Suddenly, a news-bearing soldier bursts through the door, shouting that he has a huge update. He announces that the Dronzerian forest has been completely locked down, strictly forbidding anyone from entering. The rest of the squad cheers, thrilled that they get to rest and train instead of being sent on another suicide mission. But Kyle notices our hero looking visibly disappointed by the news, his secret plan to sneak in completely ruined. Our boy rubs his temples in sheer frustration, realizing this lockdown completely hard counters his solo stealth mission to destroy the stone. The celebration is instantly cut short when the heavy, synchronized thud of armored boots echoes down the hall. The squad peeks around the corner, instantly suspicious as a fully kitted unit of Defense Force guards marches right into their territory. A stern-looking defense official makes himself right at home in the office, flanked by a wall of heavily armed escorts. Captain Taran immediately stands his ground, demanding to know why the brass is suddenly trespassing on their turf. The official doesn't mince words, revealing that the temple caught wind of their latest report and actually detected a sinister aura lingering on the beast's corpse. Taran's eyes go wide as the realization hits him. Damien's crazy tinfoil hat theory about forbidden magi was actually spot on. Laying down the law, the official announces that the temple is dispatching a priest to lead a joint search operation deep into the woods. There's just one massive catch. They demand that the specific soldier who identified the dark magic tags along for the ride. Taran immediately tries to run interference for our hero, arguing that he's just a fresh recruit with zero actual field experience. Unfazed, the official refuses to budge an inch, and Taran knows that defying the higher-ups will only get his already struggling squad hit with massive penalties. Backed into a corner with literally no other option, the captain reluctantly orders Aaron to go fetch the rookie. Listening in from the hallway, our boy just lets out a heavy sigh, realizing his solo stealth mission is officially dead, and he's about to be drafted into one massive, unavoidable headache. We kick things off with a booming patriotic salute echoing across the imposing stone walls of the Neo-Calit's base. Inside the captain's office, our boy finds himself staring down a squad of fully armored Defense Force goons. He immediately puts two and two together, suspecting this unexpected VIP visit is tied directly to that nasty magi incident out in the woods. Captain Taran rises from his desk, his expression dead serious as he addresses his top rookie. The veteran breaks the heavy news, explaining that the higher-ups are pulling a mandatory draft for a forest search operation. But surprisingly, the spiky-haired captain actually tosses my guy a lifeline, telling him he can just straight-up refuse the dangerous assignment. Damien, however, just flashes a knowing smirk, fully aware that if he sits this one out, that tainted mana stone might slip right through his fingers. Taran is completely blindsided by the immediate, zero-hesitation acceptance. Smooth as butter, our hero covers his tracks, claiming his first-hand experience with the beast will just speed up the whole manhunt. Taran buys the logic without a second thought and dismisses the teen to go gear up. This guy cheerfully thumps his chest, absolutely pumped to get back into the danger zone. As they head outside to join the formation, Taran can't quite hide his sweat, asking if the kid is really going to be okay flying solo with these guys. The captain offers to send some veteran muscle as backup, but Damien waves him off, insisting on flying solo. Flashing a $1 million smile, our guy jokes that it's way easier to cut and run if he doesn't have anyone else to worry about. Taran isn't laughing, laying down the absolute law that the rookie is strictly forbidden from throwing hands. Throwing up a crisp salute, the teen swears up and down he's just going to play the innocent gatherer and pick some herbs for the squad. With that flawless lie locked in, he pivots and sprints off to join the main expedition. Taran lets out a massive sigh of relief, while a nearby soldier just chuckles at the absolute audacity radiating off the new kid. Soon enough, a massive heavily armed formation marches straight into the pitch-black depths of the woods. The whole operation is being spearheaded by Captain Basil and a high-ranking holy woman, Priest Claire. Chilling in the back of the pack, our hero realizes this is an insanely stacked roster for a simple search mission. Out of nowhere, a random Defense Force soldier marches up and singles him out by name. Damien gives a super casual nod, instantly triggering the guy by completely ignoring basic military respect. Unbothered, my guy just stares right back, calmly asking if there's a problem. He cheekily points out that since they represented completely different units, the military food chain doesn't mean squat here, making the guy nothing more than just some random old man to him. The flustered soldier stammers about being a superior officer, but our boy just brushes him off, casually promising to cooperate with the search. The guy storms off in a huff, muttering under his breath about the absolute lunatic of a rookie. But this spicy little exchange catches the attention of Priest Claire. The sweating soldier informs her that this disrespectful kid is actually the one who first raised the alarm about the Magi corruption. Claire's eyes narrow, her interest instantly piqued by the idea of a mere rookie possessing such dangerous forbidden knowledge. Without making a sound, she quietly slips up right behind our hero. When she finally speaks up, Damien turns around, immediately recognizing her holy garb. Claire formally asks if she can borrow him for a second to pick his brain about his dark magic suspicions. She doesn't beat around the bush, demanding to know exactly how a teenager managed to identify the demonic taint. My guy feels the heavy intensity of her golden gaze, instantly realizing she suspects he's hiding some massive secrets. Thinking fast, he lies straight through his teeth, feeding her a convenient cover story about learning it all from his late father. She presses harder, asking if he actually got up close and personal with the corpse. Damien nods, smoothly claiming that he knows the local wildlife like the back of his hand. A dark vision of the towering beast flares in his mind as he describes its mindless rage and the sickly black spots spreading across its fur. When Claire asks if his dear old dad taught him to recognize those exact symptoms, our boy doesn't miss a beat, confirming the lie. Seemingly satisfied with the airtight excuse, the priest thanks him and finally backs off. The interrogation is cut short as Captain Basil steps in, declaring that they need to keep moving. He barks out orders, commanding the squad to stay sharp and report anything even slightly out of place. With weapons drawn, the heavily armed search party marches deeper into the ominous overgrown woods. But our hero pauses, his mind already spinning up a completely different side quest. This guy decides to let the official search group handle the tedious grunt work while he focuses on his own hidden agenda. Crouching low in the brush, he starts scanning the undergrowth, waiting for a very specific prize to show up. Suddenly he whips around with a sharp gasp, instantly drawing the confused stares of two soldiers right behind him. The defense guards absolutely lose their minds, convinced he's just aggroed a hidden monster. But our boy just happily holds up a rare white rot herb, stoked to score some free mon-enhancing loot. The soldiers immediately pop a blood vessel, screaming at him for triggering a panic over a literal weed. Instantly the teenager's cheerful demeanor flatlines into a dead-eyed ice-cold glare. He casually warns the guard that shooting his mouth off like that is a fast track to an early grave. Standing tall, my guy reminds these NPCs that he's only here as a cooperative consultant, not their personal subordinate. Sweating bullets, the flustered guard stammers out a demand for him to stop interfering with the search. Damien just hits him with a mocking smirk, roasting the squad for shivering in fear and dragging the defense force's so-called prestige straight through the mud. The poor soldier is left completely short-circuited by the sheer, unfiltered disrespect. Before fists can start flying, Captain Basil steps in to shut down the circus. The official sternly reads our hero the riot act, warning that this kind of insubordination is going to compromise the entire operation. Knowing he can't push the raid leader too far, Damien lets out a heavy sigh and agrees to play nice within the perimeter. The tension finally bleeds out of the air as the frustrated soldier storms off with a heavy sigh. Captain Basil doesn't waste another second, barking orders for the entire search party to drop their gear and fan out. But before they can even take a step, a guttural, bone-rattling roar echoes from the pitch-black tree line. Shadowy, hulking figures burst from the brush, sending the startled guards scrambling into defensive combat formations. At first glance, the defense force guys smirk, confidently writing the ambush off as just a standard, easily handled pack of regular orcs. The second the creatures step fully into the light, that cocky attitude evaporates as one soldier completely freezes in horror. He spots the cracked black spots creeping across their grayish skin and those unmistakable glowing red eyes. These aren't just monsters, they're corrupted orcs poisoned by magi. Roaring with bloodlust, a tainted beast charged the line with aggressive, unnatural speed. A panic-stricken guard screams a warning just as one of the massive orcs brings its weapon down in a blindingly fast arc toward his comrade. Caught completely off guard, the targeted soldier's eyes go wide as the horrifying realization hits him that he's way too slow to dodge the lethal strike. But a split second before the blade can cleave him in two, a deafening clash of metal rings out through the forest. Bracing for the end, the terrified guard opens his eyes to find our boy standing casually between him and the Grim Reaper, calmly telling the veteran to pull himself together. Effortlessly stonewalling the monster's crushing weight with his spear, my guy throws the veteran's arrogant words right back in his face, coldly asking just how low he plans on dragging the defense force's precious prestige. As the ambush kicks off, Captain Basil screams for his men to lock down a defensive formation against the charging horde. He specifically assigns a 3-man guard detail to keep Priest Claire breathing. The soldiers instantly acknowledge the order, throwing up a desperate meat shield around the holy woman. Watching from the backline, our boy notes the commander's icy demeanor, recognizing the unmistakable aura of a seasoned veteran. But all the tactical experience in the world isn't enough to hold back this absolute nightmare of a melee. A blood-curdling scream suddenly rips through the tree line, snapping Damien's attention to the crumbling front. The vanguard is already buckling under the sheer, crushing weight of the monsters, with one guard barely managing to block a massive axe strike as Claire cowers behind him. Our guy quickly realizes these aren't your average mob spawns. They're unnaturally enraged, completely roided out on dark magic. Worse yet, the corrupted orcs are completely ignoring the frontline aggro, charging straight past the swords to target Claire. The guards are knocked back like absolute ragdolls as they desperately try to body block the brute's heavy axe swings. The reason for the monster's hyperfixation becomes painfully clear as the priest starts praying, emitting a faint holy light that acts like a gigantic dinner bell. Damien watches the defensive line completely collapse, knowing full well the glowing healer is mere seconds away from being torn to shreds. Turns out her holy power is the absolute worst matchup for the dark magic coursing through their veins. Drawn to the light like moths to a flame, the monsters roar in a bloodthirsty frenzy. The remaining guards are pushed to their absolute breaking point, barely managing to block as their swords grind against the crushing weight of the orcs' heavy axes. Realizing this entire expedition is about to get wiped, our boy drops his foraging bag as his spear flares with a deadly purple aura. He knows he promised his squad leader he'd stay out of the fight, but he kicks off the dirt with explosive force anyway, leaving a crater in his wake. Leaping high into the canopy, he descends like an absolute meteor toward the massive beast below. With a single blindingly fast thrust, he skewers two of the corrupted orcs straight through the neck. The massive bodies collapse into the dirt, saving the front line and leaving the veteran guard staring in absolute bewilderment. Landing smoothly, my guy doesn't miss a single beat, immediately barking at the stunned soldier to go reinforce the others. The guard hesitates, glancing back nervously at the vulnerable priest he's supposed to be protecting. But Damien's eyes flash with intense veteran authority as he snaps that he's got things covered here. Completely overwhelmed by the teenager's commanding presence, the soldiers instinctively fall in line and rush back to the fray. The guards scramble back to the meat grinder, leaving our hero alone to babysit the kneeling VIP. Turning his attention to the shell-shocked healer, he casually checks if she's still in one piece. But Priest Claire is completely blue-screened, her face pale and drenched in cold sweat as tears stream down her cheeks. Having absolutely zero patience for an AFK teammate, Damien grabs her right by the face, harshly demanding she reboot her brain before she gets the whole squad wiped. Reading the sheer terror in her eyes, Bro realizes this is her first time pulling real aggro, meaning her earlier burst of magic was just pure survival instinct. Pointing straight into the chaotic melee, he gives her a strict no-nonsense order. Dump her entire mana pool and release her divine power to the absolute max. Startled out of her panic attack by his aggressive reality check, she urgently nods. Gripping her staff like a lifeline, she starts chanting a desperate prayer as a massive ring of holy fire erupts around her. With a final plea to the heavens, she drops the ultimate AoE, unleashing a blinding shockwave of pure divine energy. Our boy has to shield his eyes, completely caught off guard by the sheer jaw-dropping magnitude of the blast. As the entire forest canopy is bathed in brilliant white light, the realization hits him. She isn't just some standard-issue cleric, she's packing the raw, overpowered stats of a high priest. The corrupted orcs are instantly scorched by the holy aura, roaring in absolute agony as they clutch their burning faces. Seeing the monsters completely disoriented, a soldier seizes the moment, screaming for a counterattack. The rest of the defense force surges forward with a vengeful roar, surrounding the helpless beasts. In a brutal, bloody frenzy, they hack the monsters to pieces, sending thick, tainted blood spraying across the forest floor. A severed head rolls to a stop in the dirt, signaling the end of the nightmare. Exhausted soldiers collapse to their knees, gasping for air among the slaughtered horde, while our guy calmly watches from the back. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Captain Basil immediately steps up to assess the damage. Hearing that 8 men died in the ambush, the commander grimly orders their bodies recovered so they can all return home together. He turns to Claire, asking if they still need to push deeper into the woods to find the source of the dark energy. But the priest steps forward, her voice dead serious as she tells him there's no need. Kneeling beside one of the mangled corpses, she officially confirms what Damien already knew. These monsters were corrupted by magi. Staring into the pitch-black depths of the trees, she senses ominous waves of energy radiating outward, deducing that something far worse is lurking inside. She advises Basil that their battered squad is completely insufficient for this threat, and they need to retreat immediately to form a proper subjugation force. Hearing the priest's assessment, our boy smirks to himself. He knows exactly how the military machine operates. When a massive subjugation force is formed, his expendable unit will be thrown right into the vanguard. His calculating thoughts are interrupted when a nervous soldier approaches him from behind. The man sincerely thanks Damien for saving his life. Soon, several other guards are bowing deeply to the teenager, expressing their profound gratitude. Not exactly used to being thanked, my guy awkwardly scratches his neck, telling them to forget about it. He lets out a tired sigh, eager to escape the spotlight. Kneeling down, he ties up the sack of rare herbs he risked his neck to gather. He had originally planned to use them to patch up his battered squadmates back at the base. But instead he walks right up behind Captain Basil. With a completely straight face, he asks the commander to go beat up the local herb merchants. Basil looks at him like he's grown a second head. Our guy casually explains that the local vendors are absolutely scamming the troops, charging 5 times the normal rate and bleeding their hazard pay dry. Then, tossing his hard-earned sack of medicine to the stunned captain, Damien tells him to use it to treat his wounded men. Basil's utter confusion melts into sincere respect as he quietly thanks the boy. With the immediate crisis handled, the commander officially orders his unit to fall back and tend to the casualties. As our hero turns to head back to base, a white-cloaked figure watches him from the shadows. Priest Claire stares after the mysterious recruit, a subtle intrigued smile playing on her lips. Back at the base, Damien steps into Captain Terran's office to deliver his post-expedition report. The captain immediately asks if anything odd happened during the search. Keeping it casual, our boy mentions that Priest Claire confirmed the presence of magi among the orcs they encountered. Taran gravely nods, silently absorbing the heavy news. He then slides a small box across his desk. When the teen asks what it is, Taran admits he has absolutely no idea. He explains it's a personal gift from the Defense Force captain, who also sent word that a massive audit on the local gatherers will soon slash herb prices in half. Damien smirks, perfectly pleased with the economic chaos he's indirectly caused. With the report concluded, Taran dismisses the recruit, but as the door clicks shut, the veteran is left deep in thought. He remembers it clearly. During a private sit-down, Captain Basel warned him that there was something completely abnormal about the kid. The Defense Force official had dropped an absolute bombshell. The young recruit knew how to use mana. Staring at the massive sack of herbs left behind on his desk, Taran realizes the boy could have sold the haul at market price and made a fortune. He recalls how the kid selflessly donated the entire stash to the injured soldiers. Back in the present, Taran just smiles. He concludes that whatever this recruit really is, he is far from ordinary. Out in the stone corridor, our boy inspects the small wooden box. He wonders if the military actually gifted him a magical ring artifact. He pops the lid open to check his loot. His eyes go wide at the sight of a glowing blue potion, a highly coveted mana-enhancing elixir. A dark chuckle escapes him in the dim light. He is absolutely thrilled by the unexpected windfall. Suddenly, Kyle leans in right over his shoulder to ask why Damien is in such a suspiciously good mood. Startled, my guy flinches and whips the box behind his back. Kyle narrows his eyes and demands to know what the rookie just hid in his jacket. Damien smoothly lies through his teeth. He claims it is just internal medicine from the forest skirmish, which completely shocks Kyle since he had no idea the kid actually saw combat. As they walk down the hall, the muscular recruit complains about missing all the action, but our hero assures him they will both be sick of fighting soon enough. Pushing open the barracks door, our boy is instantly hit by a wall of cheers. The veteran soldiers crowd around to affectionately ruffle his hair, thrilled that he brought back such a valuable haul of herbs. Damien plays the part of the humble rookie perfectly. The celebration gets cut short when an officer steps in and claps his hands for attention. He drops the official word. A subjugation force for the Bronzerian forest will be formed this month. Until then, the men are granted free time, which sparks another loud round of cheers. One of the guys asks the rookie how he plans to spend his very first break. Instead of answering, Damien's attention is drawn to Dianel silently marching toward the exit. When another soldier calls out to him, the gray-haired veteran just mutters that he needs to train alone. Before stepping out, Dianel shoots our hero a sharp glare. The rest of the squad just laughs it off and waves the guy away as a total practice maniac. Meanwhile, out on the training grounds, a heavy broadsword hits the dirt. Dianel pants heavily, completely frustrated that his relentless solo training is yielding zero progress. During a recent clash, he barely managed to slash a beast, painfully aware he had hit a hard ceiling. He grips his shirt, crushed by the anxiety of total stagnation. His dark thoughts are interrupted when he spots our hero sprinting toward the woods with a spear. Dianel watches him leave, curious if the kid is heading to his usual spot. He remembers how, a few nights ago, he had watched the recruit secretly train alone in the forest. Connecting the dots from the veterans praising Damien for saving their lives on the expedition, it finally clicks for Dianel that the boy is hiding some serious power. Grabbing his heavy broadsword, he decides to follow the kid into the trees. Deep in the woods, our boy finally plops down in a quiet clearing. He pulls out the rare elixir, ready to get down to business. Without a second thought, he downs the glowing blue liquid. Instantly, a massive surge of purple mana erupts around him, packing way more punch than he expected. Sweating under the strain, our boy forces himself to lock in. He refuses to let a single drop of this premium energy go to waste. Hours tick by as the sun dips below the horizon, plunging the woods into pitch black. Completely exhausted, Damien finally opens his eyes to find the day is already gone. His current mana capacity is just too small, which severely bottlenecks the absorption rate. Out of nowhere, a gruff voice calls from the shadows and makes him jump. Dianel steps into the clearing and casually asks why the recruit has been meditating for so long. Damien curses himself for being so hyper-focused that he completely missed the approach. Damien asks what the veteran wants, and Dianel admits he's known about these nightly excursions for a while now. More importantly, he knows Damien slaughtered those corrupted orcs during the recent search operation. Resting a heavy hand on his broadsword, Dianel stares the kid down. He formally challenges Damien to a duel to see his full strength firsthand. Our boy tries to play the innocent recruit, citing the strict military laws against infighting. But one look at Dianel's unwavering, dead serious gaze proves this isn't a request he can just brush off. Damien knows that look from his past life. It is the desperate stare of a warrior who has hit a massive wall. He calls the veteran out on his stagnation, and the sudden insight leaves the man completely stunned. Diurnal stammers out a weak deflection. Our hero presses the issue, demanding to know exactly how long he has been stuck at this plateau. A nervous drop of sweat rolls down Diurnal's neck as his tough facade crumbles. He finally confesses that for 3 grueling months, no matter how hard he trains, his skills haven't improved a single inch. Damien nods, intimately familiar with that suffocating frustration. Reflecting on his own desperate past, he knows full well that without proper guidance, a stalled warrior will only destroy his own body. My guy warns the veteran about the severe consequences if the rest of the unit catches them sparring. Scooping up a heavy wooden branch, Damien accepts the challenge with one final chilling warning. Diurnal might actually get seriously hurt. Diurnal levels his massive broadsword and fires back that a real fight is exactly what he came looking for. Sparks instantly light up the pitch-black forest as their weapons violently collide. Flashing a cocky smirk, our hero casually gestures with his free hand, daring the veteran to bring absolutely everything he's got. Walking back from a tense strategy meeting, Captain Taran and his officer hash out the grim details of the expedition ahead. Taran insists the risk is necessary. A successful subjugation will secure a massive advantage for their forces. Their conversation is abruptly cut short by a strange rhythmic humming echoing through the trees. The two men pause and lock their eyes on the dark tree line. They draw their weapons and creep through the brush to investigate the disturbance. Peering through the leaves, they are stunned to find our boy and Diurnal locked in an unauthorized midnight duel. The officer immediately moves to break it up, but Taran throws out an arm to hold him back. The captain knows Diurnal has been stuck in a frustrating training plateau, but he never expected the veteran to take it out on a rookie. Curious to see how the prodigy handles himself, Taran orders his subordinate to just watch. As he observes the flow of the fight, the captain quickly realizes this isn't some one-sided beatdown. In fact, the gap in their skill levels is almost comical. My guy launches into the air, forcing Diurnal to brace his massive greatsword for the incoming impact. But our hero effortlessly dodges backward, evading the desperate horizontal slash. Exhausted and dripping with sweat, the older teen curses his inability to land a single hit. Damien stands there completely unscathed, his relaxed posture practically mocks the guy's frantic efforts. To Diurnal, it feels like this red-haired freak is reading his mind before he even twitches a muscle. In reality, our boy doesn't need telepathy. Diurnal's frustration is plastered all over his face. He notes that the sheer weight of the greatsword makes every swing painfully predictable. Our hero actually respects Diurnal's raw talent. It takes immense skill to fight this well while essentially wearing a handicap. But if the veteran stubbornly clings to the heavy blade just to fight monsters, it will permanently ruin his physical balance. Since stubborn soldiers rarely listen to friendly advice, Damien decides a physical demonstration is in order. He taps into the vast mana reserves unlocked by the Defense Force's elixir, and his body erupts in a blinding purple aura. The prodigy explodes forward with terrifying speed, closing the gap before Diurnal can even blink. The veteran feels the suffocating shift in the atmosphere as his instincts scream at him to brace for impact. But pride is a stubborn thing, and the veteran convinces himself his massive greatsword still holds the raw destructive advantage. Roaring in defiance, he meets the charge head-on and brings the heavy steel crashing down for a decisive blow. Our boy's glowing spear intercepts the blade, triggering a massive shockwave that violently rattles the quiet forest. The sheer kinetic force of the parry completely overpowers Diurnal, launching him backward into a rapid, uncontrollable spin. A sickening crack echoes out as the expensive weapon snaps cleanly in half, and the severed steel plunges deep into the dirt. Diurnal hits the ground gasping for air, staring in absolute horror at the ruined hilt of his prized sword. Our hero calmly approaches his defeated superior. He completely ignores the financial tragedy to focus on the lesson. Instead of offering a hand, the rookie coldly orders the veteran to get up and attack him again. Diurnal thinks the kid has lost his mind. It was impossible to land a hit with a full blade, let alone a useless metal stub. But my guy refuses to let the spar end just yet, coldly demanding that the private keep fighting. Pushed to his absolute limit, Diurnal screams and launches a desperate leaping strike with the broken hilt. Damien effortlessly sidesteps the pathetic attack, and the veteran's desperate swing meets nothing but empty air. But as Diurnal follows through, his eyes widen in realization. The shattered weapon feels incredibly light and fluid in his grip. Our hero watches the realization dawn on his superior's face, asking if the lesson is finally sinking in. He bluntly explains that the massive greatsword was always meant for a hulking brute like Kyle, not a lean fighter. The veteran drops to his knees, utterly shell-shocked that he has been sabotaging his own growth this entire time. Having successfully broken his superior's bad habits, Damien casually offers to buy him a replacement weapon as an apology. Internally, my guy smirks, knowing a single sword is a ridiculously cheap price to secure a veteran's absolute loyalty. He tells a still-stunned Dianel to meet him in town tomorrow during their free time. The next morning, the two soldiers head into the bustling market district to find a suitable replacement. While Dianel browses the standard longswords, our boy calls him over to a dusty corner of the shop. The rookie presents a pair of curved scimitars, leaving the veteran completely baffled. Damien explains that these lightweight blades are favored by desert warriors and perfectly match Dianel's agile fighting style. Dianel immediately rejects the idea, arguing that he has zero experience dual-wielding and that the thin metal won't even pierce monster hide. But our boy confidently counters, promising to personally teach him a specialized sword technique designed specifically for the curved blades. He guarantees that if Dianel masters the footwork, his combat strength will multiply exponentially. To seal the deal, the red-haired teen playfully threatens to pull his funding entirely unless his squadmate agrees to the dual-blade path. Damien gladly pays the hefty price tag, convinced the investment is worth every single coin. Damien recalls his past life, standing over Dianel's grave to mourn the loss of the only man he ever truly trusted with his life. The gray-haired soldier had been his absolute best friend, a fiercely loyal comrade who ultimately sacrificed himself to save his commander on the battlefield. Back in the present, our hero takes the wrapped package and silently vows to do whatever it takes to repay that ultimate debt. He hands the scimitars over with a chilling internal resolve. He will put his friend through a hellish training regimen so he never dies on him again. Dianel accepts the weapons but suddenly shivers when he catches a terrifying, almost demonic aura radiating from the smiling junior. Meanwhile, back at the capital's Grand Cathedral, Priest Claire requests an urgent audience with the High Priest. She cuts straight to the chase, asking the Elder if the rumors about the monk unit joining the upcoming punitive force are actually true. The Elder in white robes confirms the deployment and reveals that 20 elite priests will march alongside the soldiers. The blonde priestess is absolutely floored by the unprecedented scale of the temple's mobilization, realizing the military is taking the Magi threat incredibly seriously. Without a second thought, she volunteers to march with them and brushes off the Elder's concerns about her recent trauma in the woods. She insists her first-hand experience surviving the corrupted orcs makes her an invaluable asset to the subjugation team. Swayed by her unwavering resolve, the High Priest finally caves and grants her permission. Before bowing out, Claire casually asks if the Neo-Calit's penal battalion will also be drafted for the mission. When the Elder confirms the Suicide Squad is definitely deploying, her heart skips a beat. She remembers it clearly. During that terrifying forest ambush, the red-haired recruit violently grabbed her face to snap her out of a blind panic. The sheer authority in his voice echoed in her ears as he commanded her to unleash her divine power to save the entire squad. The priestess blushes furiously beneath her veil. She is about to reunite with the ruthless rookie who completely stole her heart. Meanwhile, the massive subjugation force finally arrives at the Arkal garrison. Captain Basil steps forward to formally welcome the arriving leadership. Baron Wilkes Yahello immediately demands to know who is running this outpost. When Basil introduces himself, the Baron sneers at his lack of a last name, instantly writing the captain off as a lowly commoner. The arrogant noble turns his back in disgust. He complains about the godforsaken dirt pit and demands they finish this mission as quickly as possible. The garrison soldiers bristle at the stuck-up bastard, and a silver-haired recruit asks if all nobles are this authoritarian. Our boy casually replies that they aren't, quickly covering his past life knowledge by claiming his father taught him. But as he watches the commander strut away, a heavy knot of apprehension twists in Damien's gut. Soon enough, Yahello stands before the fully assembled ranks at the edge of the Bronzerian forest. He loudly broadcasts the king's orders to uproot the source of the demonic energy. With a dramatic wave of his cape, the Baron orders the army to advance. Our hero playfully nudges Kyle to shout a little louder so they don't end up on the noble's bad side. The heavy boots of the massive subjugation force shake the earth as they march into the dense tree line. Kyle marvels at the sheer size of their army, but our boy warns him the vast forest won't make this a walk in the park. Captain Basil overhears the recruits and grimly agrees, feeling a deep foreboding that even this gathering might fall short. Damien swallows hard as the heavy tension of the impending battle settles over him. The troops push steadily deeper into the woods. Soon the thick trees force the soldiers to squeeze together, and frustrated shouts echo down the disorganized line. Yahello quickly barks an order to shift the formation into a narrow column to adapt to the terrain. Our hero acknowledges the noble's quick judgment, though he notes that elongating the line makes their flanks incredibly vulnerable. Basil approaches the Baron from behind to voice the exact same concern. Annoyed, Yahello haughtily demands to be addressed by his proper military title. The veteran officer respectfully suggests moving the shieldman to the center to protect against side attacks. The commander actually agrees and orders the Arkal garrison to take up the middle position. But the moment the veteran captain suggests sending a scouting party of fast runners ahead to clear the path, Commander Wilkes shuts him down cold. The noble literally laughs off the threat, boasting that their elite forces will just steamroll any mere monsters that dare show their faces. He then drops the pleasantries and coldly addresses Basil by his full formal title. The arrogant commander draws a hard line, warning the veteran that even one more word of advice will be punished as outright insubordination. Forced to yield to the noble's dangerous ego, Basil reluctantly bows his head and swallows his protests. Moments later, the expedition's vanguard effortlessly carves through a pack of green reptilian monsters, sending blood splattering across the forest floor. Yahello struts right through the bloody aftermath without a care in the world. Validated by the easy win, he arrogantly wonders aloud how the local garrison ever struggled to clear out such pathetic trash. Meanwhile, way further back in the marching line, Kyle suddenly stops dead in his tracks and sniffs the air. The blonde recruit immediately covers his nose, gagging at a sudden, overwhelming stench of rotting meat. Our boy asks where the foul odor is coming from, and Kyle points straight toward a specific patch of the forest floor. The blonde recruit gestures down at a patch of disturbed earth. Our boy stares intently at the dirt. His eyes widen in absolute horror as he recognizes the tracks. He screams for everyone to watch the ground, but it's too late. The earth violently erupts beneath the soldiers and blasts them into the air. Hideous pig-snouted monsters known as morks burst from the dirt with their snake-like tongues hissing. The veterans panic as the creatures swarm them from all sides. Damien realizes this swarming behavior is completely unnatural, since morks are normally solitary and peaceful creatures. Taking immediate command, he orders Kyle to assist the struggling front line. Suddenly a mork lunges straight at his blind spot, but Damien effortlessly spins, slicing through two of the beasts in a spray of black blood. He shouts over the chaos, demanding the squad catch their breath and face the monsters head-on. Hearing the rookie's authoritative tone, the older soldiers finally snap out of their daze. Rallied by his command, the veterans finally push back and slash down the swarming beasts. But as our hero surveys the battlefield, he realizes there are simply too many corrupted monsters to fight conventionally. Knowing exactly what they need to turn the tide, he sprints through the chaotic trees. Through the carnage, he spots two terrified priestesses huddled together. The women flinch as heavy footsteps rapidly approach their hiding spot. But it's just our boy, and Priest Claire gasps his name in pure relief as he waves them over. He leads them away from the front line, urgently ordering the blonde priestess to unleash her divine power just like she did during the last ambush. Determined to help the guy who saved her life, she immediately agrees. She clasps her hands in desperate prayer. A massive shockwave of blinding holy light erupts from her palms and washes out the entire dark forest. The sudden divine flare scorches the corrupted morks, leaving the beasts screeching in agony as they clutch their ruined eyes. Seizing the golden opportunity, a veteran officer screams for a full-scale counterattack. The soldiers capitalize on the blinding flash and ruthlessly butcher the disoriented horde. Black blood fountains into the air as the corrupted beasts are systematically decapitated. Once the dust finally settles, the exhausted veterans stand victorious among the piles of mangled corpses. Nearby, Captain Taran kneels by a slain beast to order immediate medical treatment for the wounded. But before he can finish speaking, a massive armored figure looms up behind him. The scarred captain turns his head in confusion. Baron Wilkes Yahello violently backhands him straight across the face. Taran stumbles back from the unprovoked strike, completely stunned as a bright red welt blooms on his cheek. The surrounding troops watch in horror, while the arrogant noble identifies Taran as the Neo-Calit's commander. Yahello furiously berates the man, loudly blaming the penal battalion for neglecting the forest and causing the massive ambush.